Chapter 582. No one knew where the voice came from. It seemed to come from the sky, from the ground, from the heart, from the consciousness, or from the depth of the soul. Yet, they had heard it clearly. Moreover, one could clearly sense that this voice was filled with anger, grievance, helplessness, and a hysterical unwillingness. There were so many complicated emotions, but Yun-yang and the other two could feel it clearly in this short moment. They could understand it as if they were experiencing it themselves. And then, bang! The man in black's palm strike landed on Ji Lingxi. Ji Lingxi grunted immediately while Yun-yang felt an immensely powerful force coming at him at the same time. Both of them closed their eyes at the same time. They knew that they would die without a doubt. There was no chance of survival. However, just as Yun-yang closed his eyes, he seemed to see something right before he closed them, causing him to snap them open again. The word snap was used because the speed and haste with which Yun-yang opened his eyes had reached its peak. More than anything else, it was shock. The next moment, boom! An extremely loud collision sound rang out with a loud rumble. Yun-yang was dumbstruck like a fool, but he did not mourn. The moment before Yu Lingxi was struck by the other party's fatal attack, he had clearly seen a ray of red light emerge from Ji Lingxi without warning. It was the red light that had sent him flying the other day. The red light had only flashed for a moment, but the black-clothed man's palm strike had landed solidly on the red light. Only then did an earth-shattering sound resound. Did this mean that Ji Lingxi was actually fine? At least, it seemed like perhaps she had not perished from the attack just now. Although Yun-yang had seen it with his own eyes, although he hoped that it was true, although the reality was right before his eyes, he still dared not believe it. It was unbelievable. What was going on? The man in black suddenly trembled without any warning and spat out a mouthful of blood. He let out a scream, you. Then, the seemingly invincible black-clothed figure who had descended from the sky abruptly bounced back. His back was facing backward, and his arms and legs were dangling in front of his body. With this posture, he shot straight into the sky like a cannonball. Yun-yang could still see clearly that the man in black's face was filled with endless shock. It was a kind of extreme fear towards the unknown that one could not understand. His shocked expression became more and more distant. In the blink of an eye, he had already become a black dot in the sky. Wherever the little black dot passed, a trail of blue flames would appear in the air. It was obvious that the little black dot's speed was too fast and the friction was too great, causing the air to ignite. So fast. Yun-yang was shocked as well, a mixture of bewilderment and shock. What was going on? Aren't you here to kill me? Of course he couldn't see that cold killing intent just now. But why did he suddenly display such a shocking speed and leave in such a hurry? What exactly are you trying to do? Just as Yun-yang was deep in thought, the tiny black dot in the sky sped up instead of slowing down and disappeared without a trace. Yun-yang, who was hugging Ji Lingxi in his arms, felt his mind go blank. Countless question marks assaulted him. No matter how intelligent he was, he still could not comprehend the strange phenomenon before him. This man in black's aura is astonishing. His cultivation base is so strong that it's difficult for me to match him. Besides, the malicious intent that he had when he descended from the sky has already shown that he's not here with good intentions. I believe that even if all the experts in Tiantang City were to gather, it would still be difficult for them to defend against his destructive strike just now. Forget about being forced, just his last move of shooting up into the sky like a rebound and still being able to display such shocking speed in such an awkward posture. His cultivation base is already frightening enough. Just based on the speed at which he shot into the sky with his back and disappeared from sight, I'm afraid he's already above Ling Xiaozui's. Could it be that this person is the unrivaled expert in this world? Yun-yang pondered silently. Then why did he leave? The killing intent just now wasn't fake at all. It's definitely not a joke. What is he trying to do? I can't figure it out no matter how hard I think about it. However, the most fortunate thing is that Lingxi isn't really injured. Could it be because of that sudden flash of red light? I didn't feel him retracting his force at all then, but I didn't feel any truly damaging force coming at me either. Could it be that he retracted it at the last moment? Yun-yang's cultivation base was growing more profound by the day and he was even connected to the man in black's aura just now. Naturally, he could sense the mystery behind it. However, Ji Lingxi, who was in Yun-yang's embrace, was not injured, but her entire body was stiff. After all, the sudden turn of events just now was completely different from what he had imagined. Furthermore, he was anxious and worried. Even though he was not really injured, he was still confused, unable to determine the current situation. The only feeling Yunyang had right now was that what he had encountered today was the strangest day he had ever experienced since he was born. Just as Yunyang's mind was still a mess and he was frowning at the sky, he was surprised to see that the black dot in the sky had appeared once again. However, the speed of its movement this time was much slower than before. It was like heaven and earth compared to before. Regardless, the man in black was still descending from the sky once more. Was this the second coming of the nightmare? As the figure came closer, Yunyang could see the man's black robe fluttering and his hair dancing. His eyes especially were still filled with shock, but at the same time, there was an indescribable cruelty and bloodthirst. He still hadn't given up? Yunyang's heart skipped a beat. Seeing that the man in black was getting closer and closer, they would meet again in another 200 feet, Yunyang instinctively circulated his cultivation base. Even though he knew that he was no match for the man, he had to fight with his life on the line. Just now, his chi had been sealed and he could not move. Now that he had regained his mobility, he had to fight with all his might. He would rather be beaten to death than be scared to death. Waiting for death was Yunyang's style. However, just as his hand touched the saber's hilt, there was another shocking turn of events. Boom. The black-clothed man's body suddenly disintegrated in midair without any warning. It was an extreme disintegration. His flesh and blood exploded like fireworks, then the exploded flesh and blood shattered bit by bit in the air like snowflakes, then exploded again. Yunyang rubbed his eyes. I must have seen it wrong. However, when he looked again after rubbing his eyes, he realized, the sky was blue, the wind was light, and the clouds were light. It was a cloudless day in broad daylight, extremely radiant and enchanting. Then, there was nothing. This? Yunyang's jaw dropped in shock. Disappeared? Nothing more? Did I see it wrong? That person had left just now. Was it just my imagination that he would come back? Or, with a soft whooshing sound, the black flag that hovered in the sky seemed to have lost some sort of support, falling in a crooked manner. As it fell, it grew smaller and smaller, turning into a small black flag the size of a palm. With a plop, it stabbed into the ground in front of Yunyang. The flag drooped, no longer carrying its previous demonic brilliance. Yunyang lowered his head in a daze, staring at the small flag blankly. At that moment there was only one feeling, like a chicken that had lost a battle, a dog with its tail between its legs, or a quail that had frozen in the snow. That was probably the feeling. It was lifeless. Yunyang's mind went blank once again. This was even more unthinkable than unthinkable. Was this the enhanced version of the unbelievable? Please, who can tell me what exactly is going on? Just as Yunyang was lost in his thoughts, he suddenly recalled the inexplicable curse that had been uttered earlier. *CK. Dog ant. Yunyang could not help murmuring, what does this mean? It sounded like a curse, but I've read a lot of books and memorized the past and present, but I've never heard such a fresh and refined curse before. Chapter 583. Yunyang's thoughts were muddled, completely overwhelmed by the series of events that should not have happened, that could not have happened. The series of strange events had already far exceeded Yunyang's understanding of this world's cultivators. Even before he lost his cloud manifestation, Yunyang knew that it would be difficult for him to gather such a massive amount of cloud chi, not to mention the terrifying power contained within the dark clouds. Then there was the cultivation base of the assailant in black. Yunyang could confidently conclude that his cultivation base was no weaker than Ling Xiaozue, Jun Moyan, or even Mr. Nian. Even now Yunyang was still stiff. His heart was still thumping wildly as if it could jump out of his mouth at any time. The thick sense of death that had surrounded him earlier had yet to dissipate. His hairs were still standing on end as he remained in a creepy state. It was a situation where he had to die. There was no chance of survival. The real black clouds, the real monstrous demonic flames, the real expert, the real killing intent, the real killing move, the real certain death, the real. Even that malevolent face, that hand that was already in front of him to save his life. Everything was so real. There was not a hint of falsehood in it. Yunyang could guarantee and affirm that everything that had happened was real and had really happened before. The speed of the man in black when he left had definitely exceeded Yunyang's understanding of cultivators. Even Ling Xiaozue and Mr. Nian did not have such an astonishing speed. In spite of this, everything, all the surprises, had faded into nothingness along with the loud snap. It was as if nothing had ever happened. The sky was clear as far as the eye could see, with only white clouds drifting about. Everything around him was no different from usual. He could still hear the whispers of the people on the street from afar, the voices growing louder and louder, lingering in his ears. Yun Yang heaved a long sigh. He was finally sure of one thing. The crisis was over, the death threat had been averted. Although the encounter was equally inconceivable and unbelievable, it had truly been averted. In his embrace, Ji Lingxi was still in the same position as before, hugging him tightly, her back arching with all her might. Warmth and gratitude rose from the bottom of Yun Yang's heart. At the same time, there was a subtle feeling of sharing life and death with you. It was as if the woman in his arms was inextricably linked to his life at this moment. I'm alive, you're in. You die, I go. A phrase that Yun Xiaoyao often said suddenly rang in his ears. What is the most important thing in this world? Life. If one day there is a man who can give up his life for you, then, if he is a man, he must be the most trustworthy brother in your life. If he were a woman, he would be the woman who loves you the most in this world. Encountering such a brother is a peerless true love that I might not be able to encounter even in 3 lifetimes. You don't be too far away. Encountering such a beauty is a true love that you may not be able to meet in your entire life. You must not let her down. Yun Yang was shaken to the core. The most trustworthy brother, do not be far away. An eternal true love, do not let it down. Yun Yang sucked in a deep breath. I won't leave you and I won't disappoint you. Looking at Ji Lingxi, Yun Yang suddenly felt a sense of peace and tranquility surge within him. It was as if his life was fulfilled with this woman by his side. Lingxi, Yun Yang murmured. Yun Yang smiled warmly. Then a thought flashed through his mind. The beam of red light that had appeared on Ji Lingxi just now, and the person who had cursed him. Could that person be the same person who had accidentally touched her body and sent him flying? However, this thought only lasted for a fleeting moment. It did not matter whether it was true or not. It really did not matter. The source of the red light was not something he could fathom. Just like how Lao AI could think of a power that far surpassed the limits of this world, even if he forced himself to think about it or even to understand it, it would not be beneficial at all. When Yun Yang snapped out of it, the first thing he did was to pat Ji Lingxi's shoulder gently and say softly, Lingxi, it's all right now. Don't worry. As he comforted her, Ji Lingxi's body shuddered. She lifted her head shakily and focused her gaze on Yun Yang's face. Her eyes were still filled with confusion before an inexplicable sadness appeared. She reached out to caress Yun Yang's face and asked softly, Yun Yang, are we dead? Dead. Yun Yang could not help blinking. Were they really dead? He had encountered too many mysteries today, too many inconceivable things. Even if they were really dead, it did not seem impossible for them to enter the netherworld. I only hoped that you could live on. I didn't expect that we'd still die. Are we in the netherworld now? Ji Lingxi said sadly. It's not very cold here. Where's the ghost servant? I don't want to drink Meng Po's soup, I don't want to forget you. Yun Yang coughed and said rather strangely, it's not cold here to begin with. Ji Lingxi was still in his embrace, looking a little dazed and content as she said faintly, although we're dead, as long as I'm with you, I'm not afraid of death. She bit her lip as if she was making an important decision. Thinking that they were already dead anyway, she mustered her courage and said, Yun Yang, actually, I don't want you to be my elder brother, I don't want you to be my younger brother either. I like you. Now that we're both dead, we don't care about these things anymore. Ji Lingxi lifted her head bravely and looked at Yun Yang's face. She said resolutely, I don't want to be your younger sister. I want to be your wife. I don't want you to be my elder brother. I want you to be my husband. Since she had started the conversation, she tossed aside all her shyness and spoke the most difficult words out of her mouth in one breath. It was as if she had rehearsed this speech countless times in her mind. However, when Yun Yang heard what she said, it was like a bolt from the blue. Yun Yang's mind, which had just regained its clarity, was once again filled with buzzing noises. Of course, Yun Yang was not a fool. How could he, who was known as supreme wit, be slow-witted? It was just that ever since he had to bear the burden of so many blood feuds, he had long removed romantic relationships from his life. How could he have a family without exacting his revenge? If he still had the thought of finding a wife and living happily together at such a time, how could he face his brother's souls in heaven? Therefore, once Yun Yang felt any signs of it, he would cut it off as soon as possible. In fact, when Ji Lingxi had left Tiantang City, Yun Yang had already felt it. Despite the bitterness in his heart, he had still let her go resolutely. There was also Shangguan Lingxiu. Yutang's military had come to the conclusion that the former's victory in the eastern border could guarantee at least 10 years of peace. Therefore, Lady Shangguan had slowly unveiled the layer of friendship she had hidden in her heart during this period of time. Yun Yang had even avoided meeting her. Shangguan Lingxiu had come to the residence of Yun a few times and only met her 6 nephews each time. She had never failed to see Yin Yang. Previously, when Yu Rulan was still around, she had tried her best to pull Ji Lingxi and Yin Yang together, but Yin Yang had only pretended to be ignorant. Even when he was faced with Ji Lingxi's indirect tantrum, Yin Yang still had the part of being a novice in the field of love, but more of it stemmed from the fact that he had subconsciously shielded himself from that aspect. He had pretended to be ignorant the entire time and never made things clear. Now, however, all the pretense, all the evasion, and all the confusion had vanished into thin air under Ji Lingxi's shameless words. Recalling how Ji Lingxi had looked bashful and happy when she heard that he had taken the initiative to invite her for a meal, the way she had pondered when she heard what he wanted to eat, later, when she saw that he was in danger, she had charged over without a care for her own life. She had used her body to block Yin Yang, arching her weak back as if her life depended on it. All she wanted was for Yin Yang to suffer less damage. And now, in her infatuation, she had thought that both of them would die together, but she had spilled out all the words that she had been too embarrassed to say, just to fulfill her daughter's infatuation at the very last moment. Marquis Yun's words. The scenes kept flashing before Yin Yang's eyes. Yin Yang was overwhelmed with emotion, his mouth parched. Everything that had happened in the past had shown that he was far more important than herself in Ji Lingxi's heart. Much more important. For him, she would not hesitate to sacrifice her own life. She had buried these feelings deep within her heart. It was only now, when she thought that both of them were dead, that she could finally speak her mind without any reservations. Yin Yang felt a soft warmth in his heart. It was a warm, sour happiness. It was as if, at this moment in this world, he had become a part of it. It was as if he, who had always been alone, finally had a family and a home. It was probably the sour happiness that Yin Yang had yearned for in this lifetime but had never been able to attain. He hugged Ji Lingxi gently and said softly, "Actually?" Before he could finish, he felt his mouth parched and swallowed subconsciously. Ji Lingxi was still in his embrace with her head lowered, her heart beating like a drum as she waited for him to continue. Yin Yang swallowed a few times, wanting to say that he wouldn't let her down, that he liked her very much too, that he wouldn't leave her. Wait a minute. He had rehearsed it a million times, but when he blurted it out, he continued dryly, Actually, we're not dead. I've written this chapter 3 times. I've gone through Yin Yang's psychological journey countless times. Perhaps someone will say that it's lousy, but I've thought about it in a contradictory manner and deleted countless sweet words before finally writing this chapter. I've thought about it for a long time. Really accept it? Not accept it? But I think that Yin Yang is feeling very conflicted and complicated now. He doesn't even know what he wants or what he should want. That's why I've written it this way in the end. There's not much content in this chapter, but I think that it would take more than tens of thousands of words to decipher it. My personal opinion. Don't criticize if you don't like it. Chapter 584. Ji Lingxi lifted her head abruptly, her eyes flickering with extreme shyness, shock and fear. There was also a lot of confusion, anxiety, and confusion mixed within. She extended her hand gently and murmured, "He's not dead." How? Her hand caressed Yin Yang's face. It felt warm. Then she touched her own face. It was warm as well, even a little scalding. Soon after, he twisted his thigh forcefully, and a piercing pain immediately assaulted his heart. Everything was clear. He really was not dead. Ji Lingxi screamed and struggled out of Yin Yang's embrace. She lifted her head to look at the sun, then lowered it to look at her own shadow. Her hands touched herself frantically, looking at the clothes on her body. "Oh!" Ji Lingxi covered her face and disappeared from where she was with a twist of her waist. Even Yin Yang had to be impressed by the exquisiteness of his qigong skill. It was truly a sight to behold. Bang! The door to the east room slammed shut. The force of the slamming door was so strong that even the ground seemed to tremble. Ji Lingxi's stomping of her feet in embarrassment could be heard from behind the door. I'm so embarrassed. He's not dead. How can he not be dead? Somewhere? Someone was pulling his own hair in a frenzy. I'm so angry, so angry, so angry. A punch was thrown. In the faraway sky, a star that was initially twinkling suddenly exploded, turning into cosmic dust. Someone beside him comforted him. "What are you doing? You should be happy now. Our daughter has good taste. She's generous and bright." A certain someone was still looking like he wanted to kill someone. His expression was ferocious as he jumped up and down in the air. "I've raised this cabbage for so many years. I want to slaughter that pig. I must slaughter that pig." "Behave yourself." A woman's voice bellowed, "Who do you want to kill? Tell me. Who do you want to kill?" A certain someone's expression instantly regained its clarity. He clasped his hands behind his back, and with a dignified demeanor, he said in a deep voice, "Old 8, old 9, let's go play cards with Big Boss. It's a good thing to win some money." When he spoke, he seemed refreshed, graceful, and boundlessly warm. The two people next to him held back their laughter and said, "Go ahead, your sisters-in-law are waiting for you." A certain someone had gone berserk again. His previous imposing manner had vanished in an instant, and he seemed to have revealed his true colors. "Whoever goes is an idiot." In the courtyard, Yun Yang felt an emptiness in his embrace. The person who had been in close contact with him was long gone. Shifting his feet, he turned around and muttered, "He really didn't die." It turned out that someone's condition wasn't much better than the beauty's. Only now did his incredulous thoughts get confirmed. Then a certain someone could not help but recall Ji Lingxi's performance just now and chuckled. "Little girl." A certain someone tilted his head. It was undeniable that there seemed to be something more in his heart. It was a kind of warmth, dependence, and gentleness. Was it the emotion that he had been pursuing the most in this life but had never been able to obtain it? Ha ha ha. Yun Yang chuckled dumbly and lowered his head to look at the small flag on the ground, murmuring, "What is this? It looked like something great and grand, but why is it so pathetic now?" His memory should not be wrong. This was the huge black flag that had been with the mysterious and powerful man in black. It seemed to be a treasure. The man in black had soared into the sky. He should have exploded into the sky. He should be dead now, right? It was because he had died and perished that this little flag had shrunk and fallen. Yun Yang bent down and picked up the little flag, turning it around to study it carefully. This little flag really looks a little eerie. That's not right. There seems to be something odd about this flag. It's a familiar feeling? Yun Yang toyed with the small black flag and actually felt a sense of familiarity. The sense of déjà vu was hard to suppress, and he could not help frowning in deep thought. When have I seen this thing? That's not right, I've never seen it before. If I had, I wouldn't have forgotten about such a strange thing. But this familiar feeling, what's going on? It looked like there was going to be another incredulous incident today. Just as he was pondering and letting his imagination run wild, he suddenly felt an indescribable power from the flag. It flowed along his hand that was holding the flagpole and slowly entered his body. Then it disappeared. As for that force, Yun Yang frowned as his thoughts raced. He suddenly recalled that it was when he was in the Empire of Zio. He had once used the Empire of Zio's imperial seal and allowed Emi to absorb the people's willpower and the nation's providence. The force before him seemed to be very similar to the nation's providence. No, it was almost the same thing. However, how could there be such a force of providence on a flag, and on such a strange and sinister artifact at that? Furthermore, this force of providence did not belong to mystical chi cultivation. He did not know how to absorb and manipulate it at all. Only Emi knew. Why would it take the initiative to absorb it now? Could it be that Emi had woken up? Yun Yang was shaken. He called out to it a few times but realized that it was all for naught. Emi was still uncontactable. In spite of this, Yun Yang was shocked to realize that the energy that was similar to the power of providence was separating more and more from the flag, flowing into his body bit by bit. Yun Yang then stuffed the tiny flag into his embrace. Since Emi needed this, he would absorb it as much as possible. It was something that came to him for free anyway. It would be a waste if he did not use it. However, what exactly was this thing? As time went on, Yun Yang realized that the tiny flag would initially release a stream of air the size of a strand of hair, absorbing it bit by bit. As time went on, the flow of the force of providence grew larger, gradually turning into a trickle before gradually transforming into a torrential river. It was like rivers converging into the ocean, rivers converging into a river. When the afternoon came, Yun Yang took out the tiny flag again, wanting to fiddle with it and study it. Just as he took it out, the tiny flag turned into dust with a loud crack and slowly dissipated, never to be seen again. Yun Yang stared at the black shards that were almost invisible on the ground with a dumbfounded look and murmured, "Gone? Gone just like that? How could it be gone?" Yun Yang's heart was truly pained. This was obviously an incredible treasure. In fact, anything that could store providence and even manipulate it were all rare treasures that were hard to come by. How could it be gone in less than an afternoon when it had been in his embrace? What a pity, what a pity. Yun Yang sighed, his tone still filled with regret. If he was not mistaken, This tiny flag was the culprit that allowed the other party to find him directly. Even if the treasure of providence was not taken into consideration, the fact that this tiny flag could allow the other party to locate him accurately among the tens of billions of people in the continent was already a heaven-defying ability. As long as this tiny flag remained in his hands, it would be even more impossible for others to find him. In addition, it came with a large amount of providence. It was indeed a superb item. Just as he was feeling pleased with himself for understanding it, he realized that the treasure had already turned into dust. It was such a waste of God's gift. His frustration was indescribable. Chapter 585. On the hill outside the city. The man in white from the school of Kismet State, who had appeared once before, stood up abruptly. His expression was filled with disbelief, extreme shock, and indescribable anger and sorrow. Elder Yen and the Providence flag's aura have both disappeared. At this moment, his face was as pale as a sheet of paper. There was even panic and helplessness in his expression. What did it mean that their auras had disappeared at the same time? He knew it very well. Although a skilled cultivator had the ability to suppress or even temporarily erase their own aura and a spiritual artifact had the ability to conceal itself, there could only be one situation when both disappeared at the same time. The man was dead and the flag was destroyed. Only when both of them perished would their auras disappear. Other than that, there was no other possibility. However, what cultivation base does Elder Yen possess? Even if we were to go through all the experts in this world, he should be among the top of the world. Even if Ling Xiaozue and Dugucho were to join forces, the most they could do was make Elder Yen retreat. It would be difficult for them to kill Elder Yen. Who was it? Who was it that had such an ability to completely annihilate Elder Yen? The Providence flag is a spiritual artifact of providence that stabilizes the continent's providence. It has never been damaged for tens of thousands of years. In the truest sense, it's impervious to weapons, water, and fire. Even if lightning strikes, it won't be able to damage the Providence flag. How could it be? What the hell happened? The eyes of the white-clothed man were filled with deep fear, because he thought of something else. If the person who could easily kill Elder Yen and damage the Cosmos Luck flag wanted to kill him, it would probably be much easier than killing a chicken. Oh my God, the man in white paled. I must report this to the school immediately. That's right, I didn't ask why Elder Yen would suddenly bring the Cosmos Luck flag here. Could the purpose of his trip be the source of his injury? Throughout the day, Yunyang had been shocked, bewildered, enthralled, shocked, and regretful due to the many changes that had taken place. He had tasted a multitude of emotions that were tangled and complicated. It was rare for him to be at peace. However, the others were equally overwhelmed with emotions. The black cloud suddenly disappeared. It came extremely abruptly and aggressively, covering the heavens and earth, but it retreated even more abruptly, even more inconceivably. That process really only lasted for a moment and then it was over. The whole of Tiantang City could not help feeling strange, surprised, and incredulous. All the people of the Jianghu, the assassins, and the sects were all in a state of confusion. No one understood what was going on. However, everyone was sure that something must have happened. Just now, when the Black Cloud Emperor descended, everyone felt that unparalleled and irresistible peerless power. It was real and not an illusion. But why did the source of such power suddenly disappear? Nanshan Hill outside the city. The two figures sensed that the aura of the Cosmos Luck flags in the city had disappeared, and they appeared at the same time. The two of them looked at each other and saw the deep fear in each other's eyes. It was an emotion that had been separated from them for far too long. Even when they had faced the 9 Supremes back then, they had never felt the slightest bit of fear despite finding it tricky and difficult to handle. Yet now they were actually afraid. He's been killed? Mr. Nyen sucked in a deep breath. His voice was extremely grim. It sounded like a question, but it also sounded like an emphasis. It's not as simple as being killed. He didn't even have the strength to fight back. He was killed in a single move. The other person's gaze was flickering. He felt goosebumps all over his body. This fellow came here openly, obviously looking for trouble. He was already prepared to fight. It's impossible for him to be ambushed, and no one from Yutong can ambush him. Mr. Nyen enunciated each word clearly. Even if it's an ambush to be able to kill him in a single move, what level of ability does one need? The other person said, this fellow's skull may not be very bright, but his true cultivation base is slightly lower than ours, but it won't be too much lower. At the very least, both of us can only defeat him, but we can never kill him. When it comes to killing him, let alone one of us, we might not even be able to do it even if we join hands. As for ambushing him, if we join hands to ambush him, we can injure him severely or even kill him. But to actually kill him in a single move, this. Mr. Nian furrowed his brows and said, "This is truly unbelievable. If the person who killed him were to face us." The other person's face was rather pale as he subconsciously voiced the question that had been lingering in his mind. The same. Mr. Nian was very certain. There's only death. There's no chance of survival. There's actually such a strong person in this world? How is this possible? What's more frightening is that this person must be in Tiantang City? The other person's face was pale. Why, have we never heard of him before? Mr. Nian did not answer the question. It was a silly question. If such an expert were to intentionally conceal himself, who would be able to find him? What I'm concerned about now isn't who this person is. I'm more concerned about whether this person is acting because the fool from the School of States Kismet State has forcefully broken the providence of this world, or because of some other reason. No matter what, both of us can't enter Tiantang City. Mr. Nian said, "Let's wait and see for now. Let's see how things develop. But if we don't go in, I'm afraid that our tower's forces in Tiantang City won't be a match for the combined forces of the world's assassins," the other person said worriedly. "A wise man doesn't stand under a collapsing wall. Our own safety is the most important." Mr. Nian said, "Besides, perhaps our strength will attract that person's attention more easily. At most, we can bring out some of your hidden strength. I believe that will be enough." The other person chuckled bitterly. "Old man, what about your own strength?" Mr. Nian said coldly, "The entire Four Seasons Tower is my strength." The other person choked on his words and could not help muttering, "We're all the same. What's with the pretense?" Mr. Nian's cold gaze was directed over. "I'll just send a few more men." The dark clouds came and disappeared abruptly. The entire process was filled with a sense of mystery and terror. It was thought-provoking and thought-provoking. In spite of this, the tense atmosphere in Tiantang City that was initially at daggers drawn was suddenly relaxed. Whether it was the assassins, the Four Seasons Tower, or the princes who had their own agendas, they instinctively chose not to make a move, despite not understanding what had happened. The top-notch assassins who had entered the city because of the dictum of death would hear about the incident as soon as they entered the city. All the assassins who had taken advantage of the situation were groaning inwardly. *CK, the dictum of death had finally appeared in the world. They had thought that spring had arrived for the assassins, but now that they had arrived they realized that this was spring? This was obviously the harsh winter. Chapter 586. Come to think of it, it had been a long time since the dictum of death had appeared. The owner of it would definitely not be a simple character. The fact that he had to use the dictum due to certain incidents had already proven that the consequences of the dictum of death's reappearance would not be easy. The participants who were involved due to the dictum of death would not be able to reap any benefits easily. Before the owner of the dictum of death could say anything further, the assassins in the meeting had already been dealt a heavy blow. The dark clouds and the frightening aura were not something that an ordinary person could bear. Therefore, it was better for them to observe for a few days before deciding what to do next. Yun Yang did not make any moves in the following period of time. Firstly, the matter that he had wanted to instigate previously was no longer an opportunity due to the sudden change in the situation. It would be useless to act rashly. Secondly, the conflict between the Four Seasons Tower and the assassins did not erupt due to this incident. Thirdly, which was also the most fundamental reason, the assassins that Yun Yang had hoped to see the most had yet to arrive. Ouyang Shaoxi, for example. Yun Yang had been thinking about the strange red light on Jilingxi for the past few days. He had been thinking about the attack from the man in black, the disintegration in the air, and the hidden power of the red light. Yun Yang was now certain that the man in black must be dead. He had exploded and died. He could not have been more dead. Moreover, he did not hold back in his attack at all. All the force had been directed at Jilingxi. Then there was the red light. It was the red light that had blocked the attack. Yun Yang had even boldly come up with a terrifying conjecture. Not only had the red light stopped the man in black's attack, it had even retaliated. The man in black had been sent flying at a speed that was far beyond Yun Yang's knowledge. It was not his own ability, but he had been sent flying by the force of the red light. When he landed, he had disintegrated instantly. Yes, he had been killed. When Yun Yang first thought of this, he wanted to overturn his conjecture almost immediately. It did not make sense. It did not make sense at all. He was well aware of Jilingxi's cultivation base. Her own cultivation base was much weaker than his. How could she have the ability to send the man in black flying and even kill him from the recoil? However, after thinking about it again and again, this situation seemed to be the only suitable explanation for the current situation. There was only one possibility left. Although the red light was incredibly powerful, it did not originate from Ji Lingxi's cultivation base. It would only be effective when Ji Lingxi's safety was threatened. Thinking of this, Yun Yang broke out in a cold sweat. He recalled how he had been flung away the other day and thought about what had happened to the man in black. Had he almost followed in the man's footsteps that day? No, according to the time, it should be said that he was the one who helped the black-clothed man fight the Yellow Springs. As Yun Yang calmed his thoughts and steadied himself, he began to wonder what the red light was and how it could possess such terrifying power. Yun Yang could not figure it out no matter how hard he thought about it. The only thing he knew was that Ji Lingxi's identity was probably very, very special. As the person directly involved, Ji Lingxi did not even know about the existence of the red glow. The red light must have been cast by an unparalleled expert whose level Yun Yang could not fathom at his current stage. It was set up specifically to protect her. It might not appear normally, but when there was a threat to her reputation or her life, the red light would appear automatically. Up until now, the red light had appeared twice. The first time was when Yun Yang and Ji Lingxi had accidentally touched each other on the same bed, and then the red light had appeared. This time, the strength of the man in black had reached a level that could threaten Ji Lingxi's life. Therefore, the man in black had met with a tragedy. It was not difficult to imagine how much the person who had cast the restriction on Ji Lingxi to protect her cared about her. Yun Yang wiped the sweat off his forehead and sucked in a breath. He could not help recalling Ji Lingxi's confession and sighed, "Girl, even if you like me, I like you too. Both of us can only treat each other with respect for a very long time." It had to be said that Yun Yang had never thought about it before and his thoughts were never on it. Now that Ji Lingxi had abruptly entered his heart skipped a beat and he could not help thinking about his marriage. However, it seemed that he was not as ignorant as he used to be. If he could not control himself now, perhaps he would be severely injured? Hurt his tendons and bones? Shattered body and bones? Obliterated soul and spirit? The person who cast this restriction in Ji Lingxi's body? Could it be her biological father? Yun Yang chuckled dryly. This old man is really cautious. Thinking of this, Yun Yang felt as if he had thought of something. He stood up abruptly, his entire body stiffening. His gaze regained clarity. After a long time, he suddenly cried out, "Is it? Is it?" Yun Yang could only feel his heart pounding so hard that it almost jumped out of his mouth. An even more shocking thought popped into his mind. If this red light was left by Ji Lingxi's elder, then Ji Lingxi and eighth brother are biological siblings. There's no doubt about it. If that's the case, wouldn't the person who left it only care about his daughter and not his son? Wait, if it wasn't for the person who cared about his daughter and not his son, wouldn't eighth brother still be alive? Eighth brother was actually rescued? Is it correct to think of it this way? Yun Yang felt his mouth go dry, the inexplicable joy in his heart almost bursting out of his chest. What's more, maybe it wasn't just eighth brother himself, but the other brothers were rescued as well. If this is the case, Sister Yun Zuyu's sudden disappearance that day, before she disappeared, she fed me so much good stuff. Although so many good things have been assimilated into my body, I can only unleash 100th or 20% of its power now. Those are all rare spiritual ingredients. It's already rare to find even a little bit of it. Where did she get so many good things? However, if it's given by some reclusive expert, it makes sense instead. If that's the case, does it mean that Sister Yu isn't dead as well? They were all rescued by the reclusive expert. Sister Yu's disappearance was actually only because she was fifth brother's wife. That's why she was taken away. The more Yun Yang thought, the more agitated he became. The more he thought, the more chaotic his mind became, but at the same time, it was filled with a thick sense of hope. He realized that all these incidents seemed to be connected by a single thread, deducing in the direction that he was most willing to see. If this is really the case, if eighth brother didn't die at all, then Sister Lan's last letter saying that she was very happy to be with eighth brother, would be the truth and the reality. Sister Lan didn't die for love? She was just taken away by eighth brother? Yun Yang panted heavily, feeling a rush of blood to the top of his head. At that moment he actually felt a little dizzy. Then he sprung up and dashed out, rushing to Ji Lingxi's room. It was already midnight. Ever since Ji Lingxi had confessed her love to Yun Yang that day when she thought she was dead, she had been too embarrassed to step out of her room for the past 2 days. No matter how much the young lady loved someone, she still had a sense of shame in her heart. Of course, Yun-yang knew what was bothering the little girl, so he would not disturb her abruptly, lest she felt even more awkward. However, Yun-yang could not care less now. This matter concerned the safety and whereabouts of his brothers and sister-in-law. He had to get to the bottom of it. The little girl was the only clue at the moment. There was no room for hesitation. Bang 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 bang, a series of knocks came from the door. Ji Lingxi was already asleep, her face flushed as she lay under the blanket. Her thoughts were unknown, her eyelids fluttering restlessly. Suddenly she heard the knocking that sounded like a drum. She sat up immediately and asked, "Who is it?" "It's me." Yun Yang's hurried voice came from outside. Lingxi, opened the door quickly. "I have something very important to tell you." Ji Lingxi's heart skipped a beat as she stammered, What's the matter?" "It's already very late," the little girl thought subconsciously. "Could it be that he knows my feelings and has accepted them? That's why he's coming tonight?" No. Absolutely not." Ji Lingxi felt her entire body burning up as she rejected him repeatedly. Yin Yang said, open the door. "I must see you tonight. Let's have a good talk. It's really serious." "Have a good talk, serious?" Ji Lingxi was even more flustered. What could it be that a man and a woman had to have a good talk in the middle of the night? How could serious matters be discussed at this time? They were both at the age of youth. Who did he take for a fool? No. I won't open the door even if I die." Ji Lingxi was flustered, her voice almost sounding like she was about to cry. "Please, Yin Yang, go back first. It's very late. Let's talk tomorrow morning." "It's not convenient tomorrow morning," Yun Yang said anxiously. "This has to be carried out tonight." Ji Lingxi murmured shyly, her head almost burying itself into the blanket. How shameful. What a foe. How could he even open his mouth? "You wanted to look for me just now, yet you didn't even try to avoid it. You knocked so loudly on the door and moaned so loudly. How could I have the nerve to open the door for you now? If you had been quieter just now, more discreet, I might have opened the door." What an idiot. Chapter 587. Open the door quickly. "I really have something urgent. I feel that, your brother doesn't seem to be dead?" Yun Yang lowered his voice, but his tone was unprecedentedly firm. Sensing Ji Lingxi's hesitation, he understood immediately and explained himself quickly. His words, however, were earth-shattering. What? Ji Lingxi was stunned, her first thought of disbelief. However, how could she not know that Yun Yang would never joke about such matters? She was inexplicably surprised. Without hesitation, she dashed to the door and pulled it open. Her face was pale as she asked in a trembling voice, "What did you say? What did you say just now?" Yun Yang closed the door as soon as he stepped in and said, "It's a long story. There are many twists and turns. I need to verify something with you before I can make a conclusion." Ji Lingxi took a few steps back and was about to question him further when she realized that she had only worn her underwear when she had rushed to open the door in her haste. She blushed and quickly pulled her cloak over to cover herself up. Leaning against the bed, she said, "Just tell me what you've discovered. What do you want to verify? I'll do my best to cooperate." Her worry for her brother had overshadowed her shyness. If her brother could be safe, what was the point of being embarrassed? Yun Yang thought about it and asked in a low voice, "Lingxi, you and Ji Lingfeng, my eighth brother, are really siblings born from the same mother. There's no discrepancy in this, is there?" Ji Lingxi was slightly annoyed. "What do you mean by this? Of course we're biological siblings. How can this be false?" Yun Yang blushed, feeling slightly awkward, but he persisted in asking, "This is the key question. What I mean is, where are your biological parents now? Do you know about this?" Ji Lingxi's gaze dimmed as she said, "How would I know? Ever since I started to remember certain things, my brother and I have always been orphans." Yun Yang's expression froze as he asked in surprise, "Then how can you be so sure that you're really biological siblings?" "This is very important. It must be verified." Ji Lingxi said angrily, "What do you mean? Of course we're biological siblings. What's there to doubt about? Are you crazy? Why do you keep asking these annoying questions?" Yun Yang smiled, looking much more relaxed as he said, "As long as you're certain, then eighth brother will be fine. He's still alive and kicking." "What? Yun Yang, what's wrong with you today? Why are your words so confusing and incoherent? Do you know what you're talking about? Why am I getting more and more confused?" Yun Yang's face was filled with delight as he chuckled. "You don't know what's so special about you. When the men in black attacked earlier, it was all because of your divine light that we managed to escape death. Since you have such a powerful divine light hidden within you, your parents can't be ordinary people. Since they could protect you so well, how could something have happened to your biological brother? So, my eighth brother is definitely not dead. He must still be alive. Yunyang was inexplicably excited as he spoke. Mystical? Red protective light? Escape death? Ji Lingxi frowned and looked at him suspiciously. Explain in more detail. I'm still confused and don't understand. Yunyang laughed and said, that's because you didn't pay attention to my main point. I'm saying that you have an extremely powerful and mysterious force within you. No one can truly hurt you. The day before the demonic man's body and soul were annihilated, it was because of the backlash from your divine light. Ji Lingxi was still perplexed as she said, is this the main point you're talking about? Even if you repeat it twice, I still don't understand. What red light, protective light, what's all this about? I still don't understand a single thing. It means that no matter what danger you're in, there'll be a red light? Yunyang explained in detail, so, eighth brother isn't dead. Ji Lingxi was even more confused. The more you say, the more confused I am. When did I have that red protective light? What does that thing have to do with my brother? What the hell are you talking about? Yunyang was taken aback as well. You don't know? Yes, it looks like you really don't know. That makes sense. What light? How do I protect myself? Ji Lingxi looked at herself doubtfully and murmured, where's the light? Yunyang could not help feeling anxious as well. It did not seem like it was easy to prove it. Suddenly recalling the day when he was flung away, he gritted his teeth and said, let's try it now. I think I should be able to trigger it. Oh. Ji Lingxi asked in surprise. Why don't you close your eyes first? Yunyang was a little hesitant. Ji Lingxi's eyes widened in confusion as she said, what? What did you say? Suddenly Yunyang pounced on her and hugged her without any pretense. The moment she felt the heat from Yunyang, Ji Lingxi was dumbfounded and struggled angrily. You really don't have any good intentions tonight. Yunyang explained, I'm doing an experiment. I'm trying to trigger it. As he spoke, a pair of hands suddenly reached for Ji Lingxi's chest. Ji Lingxi yelped in shock, feeling dizzy as she watched Yunyang's perverted hands grab the sacred spot on her chest and rub it. Then he actually wanted to take off her clothes. Ji Lingxi was completely bewildered as she struggled instinctively. Yunyang, don't, this. It was then that Ji Lingxi saw a faint red light emerge from her body. The moment the red light suddenly appeared, it expanded outwards without any warning. Ow! With a cry, Yunyang was sent flying like a cannonball through the wall. He flew out like a kite with a broken string, crashing into the floral tree in the courtyard and bringing the tree along with him, slamming against the opposite wall with a loud thud. Although it was not entirely unexpected, it was still an unexpected turn of events. Yunyang had no room to react to it, nor did he have the ability to react. In the end, both his arms and legs were pressed against the wall. He even paused for a moment, looking like a frog with its limbs spread wide open. Then he slid down like a puddle of mud. Yunyang spat out a mouthful of blood, his gaze unfocused as he murmured, this is it, Yunyang. Ji Lingxi cried out and dashed out quickly. Yunyang lay on the bed while Ji Lingxi sat beside him with her head buried. There was a bitter smile on Yunyang's face, his breath weak. It was obvious that his injuries were not light. Even if it was not fatal, he had suffered internal injuries. His internal organs were shaken and could not be healed in a short amount of time. In spite of this, he had paid a hefty price to confirm the existence of the red light, especially to let Ji Lingxi, the culprit, know that he was protected by the red light. This was a fact that no one in the world would believe if it was told. Although the price was a little high, it was worth it. The loss outweighed the gain. Yunyang could confirm that the red light on Ji Lingxi would appear under at least two circumstances. The first involved her innocence while the second involved her life. In order to let Ji Lingxi see and confirm the existence of the mystical red light, Yunyang had to be a rogue even if he had no other choice. I really don't understand. I know that it's risky to be a rogue, but why are there still so many rogues in this world? Yunyang was melancholy. He dared to guarantee that if every rapist and hoodlum were to encounter the same situation as him every time they did something bad, there would be no such profession in this world. They would vanish forever. Yunyang rubbed his fingers as if he could still feel the smooth and gentle touch. He could not help sniffing it and murmured, this feeling? It's pretty good. I've never touched something like this before, but it's so exciting just touching it. I'll find a chance to. Yunyang. You're going to die. Ji Lingxi had just come in. Listening to Yunyang's murmurs, she was embarrassed beyond words. She was here to take care of the patient, but in her confusion, she had kicked him out subconsciously. Ah! Yunyang shrieked and fell to the ground, barely breathing. The incident had been verified. Thus Yunyang was relieved. How could such a mighty figure watch his son fall into the abyss of death and be consigned to eternal damnation? If his daughter had such a magical protection, how could his son not have one? Therefore, eighth brother was probably not dead. There was at least an 80% chance that he was still alive. Furthermore, not only was eighth brother not dead, his other brothers were most likely safe as well. This could also explain why fifth sister-in-law and eighth sister-in-law had disappeared so suddenly and in such a bizarre manner. With the intervention of such powerful beings, even if the disappearance was even more bizarre and inconceivable, it was still reasonable. However, the accountant Ji Lingxi was even more confused. Who am I? Who are my parents? What's with the red light on me? Ji Lingxi's body and mind were in an unprecedented state of confusion. At the same time, a deep resentment was growing bit by bit. Now that the truth was right before her eyes, she knew that she was indeed blessed with an unparalleled power. Her parents must have been almighty beings of this world, but all of them had such a powerful cultivation base. They were invincible existences in this world, able to kill a superb expert with a simple seal. Then why did all of you abandon your son and daughter? Why did you let us live under someone else's roof and grow up alone? I don't believe that all of you can't protect your children with such powerful abilities. I don't believe that all of you can't find us after setting up a seal. What I don't believe even more is that all of you are dead. Ji Lingxi bit her lower lip, her expression filled with stubbornness. This fact was obvious. A seal could be triggered by an external force and could last for a long time, so the person who had cast the seal must still be alive. This was an indisputable fact. There was nothing to be said about it. If the person who had cast the seal on Ji Lingxi was already dead, the seal would have disappeared a long time ago. This was a well-known truth. However, if one was still alive and had such remarkable abilities, why did one have to watch his son and daughter struggle in this world? What kind of logic was that? Ji Lingxi believed the truth that her elder brother was not dead. However, she did not feel much joy at this piece of good news. She was engulfed in an indescribable emotion. Yunyang was well aware of this emotion, but he was helpless and helpless. Even with Yunyang's eloquence, he could not persuade her otherwise. He found it hard to speak. It was still the same day. I've come to Hangzhou this time to discuss the film adaptation of Supremacy. It's almost settled. Therefore I'm very cautious. Brothers, if you have any thoughts, you can leave them in the book review and comment section. I really want Yunyang to appear on the screen. There's another piece of good news. I heard that the World Conquering Films project has been restarted. I'm so excited that I've been drinking for the past 2 days and haven't written much. I'm sorry, but I'm really excited. There's one more thing. At the request of Hai Hun Yi, I'm asking for a monthly vote on behalf of Zhou Zi's king. How long has it been since a Feng family disciple's monthly vote has been cast? Support the General League. Chapter 588. Ji Lingxi's disappointment lasted for a whole day before she slowly adjusted herself. The reason why she could maintain it for so long was because of what Yunyang had said. Did it make a difference whether she had parents or not? That night, when Yunyang had exposed her, Ji Lingxi was filled with sorrow and disappointment. No words of consolation could enter her ears. Furthermore, it was late at night. It was not convenient for Yunyang to stay any longer, so he bade her farewell and left, wanting to leave the young lady alone to calm down. However, the next day, Ji Lingxi had no appetite for food or drink for the entire day. She looked haggard, looking at the 2 huge dark circles under her eyes. She probably did not sleep for the entire night as well. When it was time to light up the candles, Yunyang brought her dinner personally, but Ji Lingxi was not hungry and did not want to eat. Yunyang could not take it anymore, so he uttered those words. Ji Lingxi was stunned when she heard him. It was as if her heart had been struck, causing her to lay all her worries out on the table. For the first time, Yunyang's usually calm expression showed signs of worry. He said slowly, "Lingxi, do you know? I'm an orphan too. King Yun Xiaoyao isn't my biological father. Just like you and eighth brother, I don't know who my biological parents are. This is my biggest regret in this lifetime, but as long as one is alive, one must live in the present. The days must go on. If they're still alive and they acknowledge me, I'll naturally be filial to them. However, if they're no longer here, I still have to live on. Actually, if you think things through and see through them, it's just that. It's a fact that I'm an orphan. Why blame the heavens and blame others? I didn't know who they were since I was young anyway. Isn't he still alive to this day? Strictly speaking, isn't your situation 100 times better than mine? After what happened yesterday, I can already confirm that your parents are still alive and they're the best of the best. Most importantly, they care about you unusually. They've set up a mystical seal on you that will activate the protection once you're in danger. Can't you see their sincerity? Is it really good to just keep complaining? Yun Yang recovered his usual smile and looked at Ji Lingxi warmly, saying softly, Lingxi, do you know how envious I am of you after I confirmed the existence of the protective red light on you? Or even jealousy? It's hatred. Yun Yang sucked in a soft breath and said with a smile, my parents left nothing for me. Yun Yang walked out after he finished his words and did not say another word. Ji Lingxi was taken aback. If that was the case, then she was much more fortunate than Yun Yang. At least she still had her brother and the red protective light. As for him, he really had nothing. Yun Yang's back was still as straight as ever when he walked out, but Ji Lingxi could clearly feel that the straight back bore too much desolation. She could not help the pain in her heart. Impulsively she called out, Yun Yang? Yun Yang turned around and smiled quietly. Ji Lingxi leaned against the door frame and mustered her courage to say, you're not lonely, you still have me. Yun Yang nodded and flashed a bright smile that was tinged with a hint of helplessness and self-mockery. He then turned to leave. Ji Lingxi was the most sensitive at the moment. She could sense the odd meaning behind Yun Yang's smile and could not help being taken aback. It took her a long while to figure it out. She could not help spitting and blushing, this bastard. Yun Yang was obviously saying, what's the use of having you? I can't touch you, I can't even touch you. They could only treat each other with respect. Another 3 to 4 days had passed. The weather had begun to warm up slightly, but the various forces in Tiantang City did not make much of a move. The so-called not much of a move was only relative. Although they looked like they were doing nothing, they were actually beginning to make some tentative moves. Coincidentally, at this time, a rumor rose without warning and swiftly spread throughout Tiantang City. Hey, did you know? The dark cloud that day was really scary. It was a demon that came to Tiantang City to wreak havoc, but it met young Master Yun unexpectedly and was killed with a single punch from young Master Yun. Young Master Yun? That young Master Yun? It's young Master Yun Yang, Yutong's unrivaled expert. Bullsh asterisk T. What do you know? What the F asterisk CK do you know? Don't spout nonsense. Yun Yang is a popinjay. None of his fame and achievements came easily. Have you forgotten his past popinjay reputation? The leader of Tiantang City's popinjays? How can someone like him be a master who can defeat demons? You're exaggerating. Do you know the whole story? Of course I know. I really don't know where did the young Master Yun you mentioned come from, tarnishing the grace of that rare elite for no reason. Let me tell you honestly, the peerless former who killed the demon that day was a mysterious assassin. That mysterious assassin saw the demon wreaking havoc on the world and appeared in the mortal realm. With just one move, that demon was completely destroyed. Assassin? You're saying that the expert that day was an assassin? He was an assassin, absolutely. How could there be such a formidable assassin? Besides, aren't assassins always murderers? The one who killed that day should have been an otherworldly expert who was compassionate and compassionate. Assassins are divided into different classes, alright? Some kill for money, some do it for justice, alright? Otherwise, why do you think the dictum of death existed that day, and why does it still have such a majestic presence today? That's true. Didn't the dictum of death reappear in the world previously? Did that unparalleled assassin come because of the dictum of death? Did he kill the demon by coincidence? Remember to keep it a secret. This is a big secret, how can an ordinary person know about it? Did you know that the demon in the dark cloud was killed by a mysterious assassin with a single strike? Why did I hear that it was young Master Yin who killed it? How could that popinjay have such a skill? Why don't you think about it? That's true. That popinjay was a glutton in the past, how could he have such capability? I saw it with my own eyes that day. I was in a restaurant facing that street. I saw the demon in the dark cloud suddenly descend with an earth-shattering aura, heading straight for the backyard of the residence of Yun, as though it was going to crush the residence of Yun. But at that moment, what? Tell me. Don't keep me guessing. On the street, there was a gray-robed old man with a hunched back, completely inconspicuous. Just as the dark cloud descended, the gray-robed old man suddenly raised his head. Wow. Wow, what? Was that old man in black or gray? What's with that look? Shut up, what are you interrupting for? It doesn't matter what he wore. What's important is that the moment the old man raised his head, the entire sky lit up. Those two gazes dispersed all the black clouds of demons in an instant. Wow! Then the old man said, "Since the dictum of death has appeared, how can demons be allowed to wreak havoc?" Then he leaped up and a flash of sword light appeared, killing the demon in the sky. And then the gray-robed old man reverted to his ordinary look. If I hadn't looked closely, I wouldn't have noticed that this half-buried old man was actually such a divine figure. You saw it with your own eyes? I swear on the name of all 8 generations of my ancestors that if there's a single lie, may heaven and earth destroy me. Amazing, truly amazing. That's right, what kind of clothes did that old man wear? Do you have a definite answer? Have you heard? The unparalleled assassin, the black-robed old man? Yes, I've heard that it was Dugucho who did it himself. If it wasn't him, who else would have such a skill? Huh, really? But why did I hear that it was Jun Moyan who did it? That can't be right. I heard that it was the unrivaled expert Ling Xiaozue who made an exception to protect Heaven Tang Anha. Anyway, it was an old man dressed in black. There's no doubt about it. Have you heard? Dugucho made his move. He killed the dark cloud demon with a single strike. He's an unparalleled expert with unparalleled majesty. Of course I've heard about it. Sai, I'm finally hearing about this unparalleled expert again. I'm comforted. It's said that no one knows him, but it's within reason. A strong expert like him has long returned to his natural state, keeping an exceedingly low profile. However, many experts have already analyzed it. That black robe is proof. It's said that Dugucho has been wearing that hue ever since his beloved wife passed away. Yes. I've heard about it too. Dugucho misses his deceased wife. He sits before the grave every day, his back is bent, yes. But the most convincing thing is still his sword. It's a sword that can shake the heavens and the earth. Dugucho's sword. The sword known as the Sword of Solitude. That's right. The unrivaled expert lives up to his reputation. That's not right. Ling Xiaozue is the publicly acknowledged unrivaled expert. How can Dugucho be the unrivaled expert? So what if I say Dugucho is the unrivaled expert? Oh Dugucho, the Dugucho who fell behind the clouds for the sake of his beloved. This is the irreplaceable unrivaled expert in my heart. The day you died was the day dark clouds engulfed Tiantang City. Do you remember? Of course I remember. What? At that time did you feel a very, very lonely feeling? Did you? Now that you mention it, I think I did. That's right. Let me tell you, it was Dugucho who did it, using his Heartbreak Sword of Solitude. Huh? Heartbreak Sword of Solitude? The sword is like its name, the technique is just like its name. I see. No wonder. But I heard that young Master Yun. How can you believe that? Young Master Yun has a little bit of cultivation base, but, that's true. Young Master Yun is good at fooling around with girls and popinjays, but when it comes to fighting demons, yes, News like this had somehow spread throughout Tiantang City. Almost everyone was discussing this topic. Ordinary Tiantang citizens, martial artists, assassins, sects, officials. Dugucho had reappeared in the world. Dugucho had come. Dugucho had come for the dictum of death. Dugucho had come to Tiantang City. Dugucho had slain a demon. It was as if everything was a fact. Outside the city, a gray-clothed old man walked into Tiantang City with unsteady steps. His back was hunched, his hair was white and his face was weathered with loneliness. No matter how one looked at him, he looked like an old man with one foot in the grave. If one had to point out the difference between this old man and an ordinary old man, it would probably be the long bundle he carried on his back. Anyone with a discerning eye would know that it was a sword. A sword? At the city gate, the soldiers looked at the gray-clothed old man with indescribable respect and reverence in their eyes. It was as if they had seen a deity. "You're here, old man. Please enter the city quickly." Travel permit? Why would I need a travel permit? Your arrival is a big deal. Please. The gray-clothed old man's murky eyes widened from the unexpected attention. What was going on? It had been so many years since I last came out. How could so many people still recognize me? It was rather bewildering. "May I ask if you're old Senior Dugu?" the guard at the city gate asked respectfully from the bottom of his heart. The gray-clothed old man was even more shocked. Did he really know me? Did he not mistake me for someone else? It's nothing. Old Senior Dugu, please." The guard at the city gate wiped his sweat, his heart pounding, his mouth dry in an instant. He had admitted it. It was really, Oh my God, I've actually seen a legend with my own eyes. The gray-clothed old man entered the city in a daze, but he could feel many people looking at him with reverent gazes along the way. His bewilderment grew. Some of the Jianghu people had just seen him, and their faces immediately turned as white as a sheet, without any trace of blood. When he arrived at the city center, he found an inn and entered. In the end, he was given the best room in the inn, and the innkeeper directly stated that he didn't need to pay, and that he could stay as long as he wanted. As for the person who was originally staying in that room, he moved out without saying a word, and even invited him in as if he was his ancestor. The gray-clothed old man grew more and more surprised by what he had encountered. This did not seem to be normal, or rather, it was too abnormal. His curiosity piqued. He quietly activated his supernatural power to listen to the conversations of the people within a few thousand feet radius. He immediately understood what had happened. Dugucho had attacked here? Killed the demon who brought disaster to the world with a single strike? Saved the people of this city? The gray-clothed old man was bewildered. I've never done anything. Although I'm no longer in the martial world, there are still legends about me in the martial world. This is the norm, but I didn't do anything, but the martial world has forced my reputation to be a legend and a myth. Isn't this too much? Chapter 589. This old man in gray who had just entered Tiantang City was, without a doubt, the real Dugucho. Due to the sudden reappearance of the long-lost dictum of death, the murderous intent that had lain dormant in his heart for a long time made Dugucho feel that his body and mind were shaken once more. It was also at this moment that he suddenly realized a fact. He had been called a peerless expert by the world for a long time, but when it came to fame and legendary status, he seemed to still be quite a distance away from Sun Changkong back then. At the very least, he could not do it. After so many years of passing away, he could only rely on the hint of murderous intent hidden in the dictum of death to spread it across the entire continent, shocking the entire continent's assassins and causing them to flock to him. It was because of this that Dugucho's long-dormant thoughts turned once more and he descended the mountain. I thought that I had reached the pinnacle of this world, that there was no longer a path ahead of me. Therefore, while I'm here with you, I'm also waiting for my end. When the day comes, I'll bury myself under this tree and truly be with you forever. But now, I know that there's a realm in this world that's even higher than mine. It turns out that there's still a path ahead of me. Therefore, I want to see what the scenery of my unfinished path is like. Don't worry. Whether I succeed or not, no matter what the scenery is like, I'll come back to accompany you 3 years later. Dugucho stood before the grave and left behind these words. He then carried the treasured sword that had been sealed for 500 years and walked out of the mysterious valley. Throughout his journey until he stepped into Tiantang City, his heart had been calm and unruffled. There was nothing in this world that could move Dugucho and cause ripples in his heart. However, the moment Dugucho stepped into Tiantang City's territory, he felt something strange. Everything that he saw and heard before him seemed to be completely different from what he knew. This world was completely different. It was strange. It was strange. Could it be that the memory and eyesight of people nowadays are unimaginably good? I haven't stepped foot in the martial world for 500 years, but they still remember me. This was Dugucho's initial thought, but he was enlightened later on. This isn't what I did. It's just someone forcing me to take the blame. Then a thought popped up in his mind. Then who was the one who put the blame on me? His next thought was a terrifying conspiracy theory. But how did this person know that I would come? He even grasped the timing so perfectly. Could it be that in this world, there was actually someone who could track me and completely grasp my movements? This is simply inconceivable, preposterous. His final thought was, there is no such person in this world. It is probably a coincidence. The mastermind did not know that I would come. He just threw the blame on a legendary person out of habit. After all, I have not shown myself for too long. Perhaps I have already passed away. It is a clever move to throw the blame on me. However, the enemy's arrangements are so meticulous. Now that I've reappeared, I'm bound to be in big trouble. However, so what if there's trouble? In this world, is there any trouble that I can't handle? Having thought through everything, Dugucho, who had a clear mind, did not plan to conceal his whereabouts anymore. Since everyone knows that I've reappeared in this world, everyone knows me and everyone knows that I'm staying here, then so be it. I'll stay here and live here openly with my original face. I'll see who in this world dares to cause trouble for me. Is there really a trouble in this world that I can't afford to offend? If there really is, then it will be the most valuable thing of this trip. If there really is, then it will be the most valuable thing of this trip. Just like that, Dugucho moved into the best room in the inn and stayed there peacefully. The inn that Dugucho stayed in was neither big nor small. It was located right in the middle of the outer city, outside the inner city. It was not exactly luxurious, but it was not deserted either. However, from the moment Dugucho checked into the inn had instantly turned into the martial world's holy land. Many Jianghu people came from all directions just to take a look at this inn from afar. Then they left with a sigh on their faces. However, with every step they took, they turned their heads back. They were full of emotions, their interest waning. It was thought-provoking. Dugucho. That's the legendary Dugucho. If it's possible, I'd like to stay in this inn as well, but it's too deliberate and pretentious to go there now. It'll only provoke disgust and bring about my own destruction. Forget it. As for the martial world people who happened to be staying in the inn, they were thinking of a different matter. With Dugucho staying here, even if they were to eat and drink as they usually did, they were afraid that they would disturb the other party. Even if they wanted to let out a fart in the middle of the night, they would have to hold it in, for a moment of carelessness might bring about a fatal disaster. The discomfort was indescribable. Therefore, from the second day onwards, the martial world people who were initially proud of staying in the same inn as Dugucho found excuses to check out. A myth was a myth, of course it was good. However, it was best if one only existed in a myth. Once a myth was in front of them and interfered with the lives of the common people, the only outcome would be horror. Everything else aside, just imagine that if someone were to fight Dugucho here, the shockwave alone would be enough to kill them 800 times over. They could not afford to offend him. Since they knew that they could not afford to offend him, they had better hide as far away as they could, away from this place of trouble. Yes, this place that was destined to be a place of trouble. By the afternoon of the second day, there was no one else in the inn other than the innkeeper, the staff, and a handful of people. The only guest left was Brother Dugucho. Just when the innkeeper was certain that his inn wouldn't have any more business in the short term, a middle-aged man calmly went through the check-in procedures under the astonished gazes of everyone in the inn and officially moved into the inn. The middle-aged man did not stop after he entered his room. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he knocked on Dugucho's door and asked, "Is anyone in?" The innkeeper craned his neck to watch from below, thinking, "I don't think I've told you which room Dugucho is staying in. How did you find it so accurately? Could it be that you're a demigod?" The door opened. The gray-clothed elder appeared at the door and asked with a frown, "Who are you?" Chapter 590. The sentence was really awesome. The innkeeper almost fell over when he heard that. Yes? *CKU. I feel like my inn is going to be torn down just because of this statement. Who do you think you're talking to? That's Dugucho, the legend of this world, the myth of the human realm, Dugucho. It looked like his inn was about to welcome Dugucho's first blood sacrifice since his reappearance. It was a pity that things did not always go as one wished. Dugucho was not angered. Instead, he said with a smile, "I've guessed it." The middle-aged man smiled and said, "That's great. Shall we have a drink later?" Dugucho nodded. Sure. Faced with the scene before him, the inn owner felt a wave of dizziness wash over him. What was going on? Yes? I've guessed it, a myth of the legends indeed. Even the way he spoke was different. Amidst the bewilderment, an epiphany rose in the inn owner's mind. This middle-aged man was probably a terrifying figure of the legends as well. Otherwise, how could he converse with Dugucho, who was like a myth of the human realm? About an hour after the middle-aged man checked in, another old man with snow-white hair and beard also checked into the inn. After moving his luggage into the room, he slowly went over and knocked on the door of the room. The door opened and the gray-clothed elder, Dugucho, appeared. "Who are you?" The white-haired elder who came later replied with a grin, "Guess?" Below, the head of the innkeeper was covered in cold sweat, dripping profusely. Today was truly a day of shock. Dugucho said, "I haven't guessed it yet." The elder said with a grin, "Why don't we talk about it after we have a drink tonight? I have the best wine in the world here." Dugucho said, "Oh? I've guessed who you are now." The elder laughed. "It doesn't matter whether you can guess it or not. See you tonight." After getting the affirmative answer, the white-haired elder returned to his room without another word. The inn owner was speechless. Just like that, another 2 hours passed and another person checked into the inn. The man was in a sorry state. He looked as if he had fallen apart and was barely holding on. He was so skinny that his skin was wrapped around his bones. When he stretched out his hands, if it weren't for the flesh on them, the innkeeper would have thought that he was a skeleton. Just as he staggered into his room, he paused for a moment before he came to Dugucho's door and knocked on it. Another one knocked on the door? The inn owner thought to himself that if he were Dugucho, he would be furious to be disturbed so many times. Unexpectedly, the door opened and Dugucho, who had appeared at the door, looked as calm and unfazed as before. "Who are you? Take a guess?" It was the same two sentences that were repeated like a bowl. "The boss thinks, King. I think this mythical expert Dugucho, who has already moved in, is an imposter." He was teased like this 3 times in one afternoon. If it were me, even if I didn't go crazy, I would still be furious and draw my sword in anger to settle the score. Ck your guesses. Dugucho was a good-tempered man. He did not lose his temper and said faintly, "I can't guess." The skeleton-like person said, "How about I perform a divination for you in a moment? It's free of charge." Dugucho thought about it and said, "I've guessed who you are. Shall we drink together tonight? You want to kill me, but I'm ashamed to accept it. I'll buy you a drink first, then it won't be considered free." The previous 2 men had taken the initiative to invite him for a drink, but Dugucho had taken the initiative to invite this skeleton-like person. The inn owner's first reaction was that even if this person did not shed tears of gratitude, he should at least be overwhelmed by the favor. Unexpectedly, the skeleton-like person did not react in the slightest. Instead, he said naturally, "Sure, let's drink tonight. I'll read your fortune after we're done." It was the same day that Yun Yang was almost driven mad by Shui Wuin's incessant messages. There was no other reason for it, there were just too many messages. Of course, he was most interested in a few of them. Confirmed. 500 years ago, the Heaven Leaderboard's top expert, Dugucho, has entered Tiantang City and is currently staying. There was a person who stayed in the inn that Dugucho stayed in when no one dared approach it. Another person. There's no movement from the Four Seasons Tower now. The assassin organization is restless, they might strike at any time. There's a sudden increase in the number of people coming and going from the Crown Prince's residence. It's quite a commotion. Dugucho had actually come. Yun Yang was taken aback by this change. Just as Dugucho had expected, Yun Yang did not expect the man to really appear. It had been more than 500 years since Dugucho had last made an official appearance. It was because of this that Yun Yang had released the news to divert attention. In spite of this, Dugucho had reappeared at this critical juncture. Did that not mean that the fake news that he had released had become the truth? Was this a stroke of luck? In any case, it was still a pleasant surprise. Dugucho is currently confirmed to have appeared in a small inn in Tiantang City. If he had really made a move a few days ago, it's possible that he could have killed Elder Yen with a single strike. He has been away from the martial world for 500 years. Who knows how much his cultivation base has improved by now, but it's only a possibility. How much longer until the school's reinforcements arrive? You'd better go see what Dugucho wants first. Just take a look, don't cause any more trouble. Yes. That night. On such a cold day, the innkeeper had thoughtfully placed a brazier under a small table. Around the table, 4 braziers were placed in each of the 4 directions, filled with burning charcoal. For a moment, the entire inn was warm and cozy, like a spring breeze. The 4 of them each occupied a corner, their expressions calm and unruffled. I've roamed the martial world my entire life, but this is the first time I've had a gathering like this. This trip has been worthwhile. The white-bearded old man was the first to speak with a smile. Not bad at all. If it wasn't for Senior Dugu's unexpected return to the mortal realm, I'm afraid we wouldn't have the chance to gather like this in this lifetime. The middle-aged man, who was dressed in a green robe, smiled faintly and said, "Actually, it's enough for some things to happen once in a lifetime. Besides, I'm afraid we'll have to stay here for a few more days. The world is like a game of chess, unpredictable." The skeletal man grinned and said, "Who can know if it's unpredictable or not? The so-called rare is just that everything is difficult at the beginning. With the first time, the second time won't be too far away." The white-haired old man flashed a lecherous grin and said, "What you said actually made me think of women." Before the white-haired old man's words echoed in the air, the 4 of them burst out laughing. Even Dugucho was laughing so hard that he almost cried. The innkeeper was cooking, his ears perked up. He curled his lips discreetly. Surprisingly, he also understood the meaning of the words as he smirked. "Guess who these people are? My eyesight has stabilized, it's only dropped by 0.2 points. My body is completely normal. My new glasses have arrived as well. I've already left for home. In a few days I'll start to make up for it." Chapter 591. A few appetizers were served. With a wave of the white-haired elder's hand, a pot of wine appeared on the table. Just one pot? The skeletal man said, I haven't even had a sip of water in so many years. It's rare that I can drink your wine, and you're only giving me one pot? The white-haired elder snorted and said, You don't understand drinking. If you take out hundreds of pots of good wine at once, everyone will think that it's worthless. It's too much. Besides, one can only drink 8 taels at most if they can drink a caddy of it. It's to make everyone think that it's too little. Then, everyone will have a sense of, I have to drink more to avoid losing out. Only then will the drinking be interesting. The white-haired elder explained with a look of disdain. Brilliant. Dugucho and the middle-aged man beside him gleamed. The skeletal man chuckled as well. As he removed the mud seal, he asked, How many pots of this wine do you have? The white-haired elder answered, There's only one pot in this world. All 3 of them were dumbfounded. Only one pot? Really? The middle-aged man asked in surprise, Why do I feel like there's not much truth in your words? The white-haired elder was unperturbed. Believe it or not, it's up to you. The mud seal was removed. The aroma of the wine rose instantly, forming a hazy mist. Within the mist, there were mountains, rivers, and images of heaven and earth that lingered for a long time. The white-haired elder was reserved, the corners of his lips tinged with pride. Even Dugucho and the middle-aged man were mesmerized by such a fine wine. They praised, Great wine. It's truly the best wine in the world. The skeleton-like man didn't say anything. The 2 of them watched as the mist in the air quickly dissipated. When they turned their heads, they saw that the skeleton-like man had already impatiently picked up the wine jar and poured himself a bowl full of wine. Then, he held the wine pot in one hand while the other picked up the bowl swiftly. With a swoosh, he finished the wine and began to pour it into his own bowl. Slow down. Dugucho said angrily, How can you eat alone? The middle-aged man also shouted, How much of such fine wine can there be in this world? You actually stole it. The skeletal man snorted. What do you know? For a drunkard like me, this is the greatest respect to the one who brewed this wine. Dugucho and the middle-aged man scoffed at the same time, but it did make sense when they thought about it. Seeing that there was not much wine left, both of them began to fight for it. My bowl? The skeleton refused to let go of the wine pot. Dugucho extended his arm and shot a wine arrow into his bowl. The middle-aged man opened his mouth and an orange-yellow wine arrow flew right into his mouth. A jar of wine was almost gone with a whoosh. The 3 of them burst into laughter. Awesome. They spoke in unison. Where's the wine? The 3 of them put down their wine bowls and looked at the white-haired old man. The white-haired old man stared speechlessly at the empty wine jar that was spinning on the table. He took out a jar of wine and smelled it and it was gone. As the host who had treated them, he had not even had the chance to drink a drop. All of you aren't courteous at all? The white-haired old man snorted and said in annoyance, My wine is gone the moment I take it out. But how can my wine taste so good? Dugucho said with interest, Oh? So you're saying that you're asking for our help, that's why you're treating us to wine? Can you understand it this way? The white-haired old man snorted and said, Of course. Since you've drunk my wine, of course you have to do something for me. In this old man's entire life, I've never treated a guest with my wine for nothing. The old man's words were domineering. In spite of this, Dugucho and the other 2 exchanged glances and guffawed at the same time. Old man, let me tell you, you found the right person to treat us today. In this world there are too few things that we can't do ourselves. The middle-aged man in green smiled and said, However, a jar of wine won't be enough to get someone to do something. The skeletal man came to a sudden realization and said, That's right, that's right. My temper has always been that if I don't drink enough wine, I won't do anything. The white-haired old man was dumbfounded and said angrily, You're an expert after all. How dare you threaten me like this? You are the giants of the Jianghu, where is your heroic spirit? He turned to look at Dugucho with a huff and said, Luckily there's old brother Dugu. Old brother Dugu has promised me just now. It doesn't matter whether the 2 of you do it or not. Dugucho was dumbfounded. When did I promise you? The white-haired old man was dumbfounded. I said that you found the right person. There aren't many things in this world that we can't do, am I right? Dugucho asked, Is that what I meant? I only said that there aren't many things that I can't do. I didn't say whether I'm willing to do these things or not, did I? The white-haired old man coughed violently, his face and neck flushed. He was so angry that he could not even speak. Pointing at them, he bellowed, You? How can you be so shameless? Dugucho rolled his eyes. With a flick of his hand, The empty jar of wine spun on the table as he murmured, "This wine is delicious. It's just that it's a little too little. As little as the things that can't be done." The middle-aged man in green caressed the wine bowl and sighed softly. 1,000 cups are too little when drinking with a bosom friend. But if the wine isn't enough, then it's really too much to say when we don't see eye to eye. The skeletal man knocked the wine bowl with the chopsticks in his hand and sang loudly, "Ding ding ding, dang dang dang, ding 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 dang dang dang. Good wine, the wine smells so good. I won't force you if you don't give it to me. No wine, no discussion, no help means no help. No discussion, no help. Dang dang." Dugucho and the middle-aged man in green laughed until tears streamed down their cheeks. The white-haired old man was shaking with rage. He glared at them and asked, "Are you helping or not?" "No." The three of them had a tacit understanding. "You've crossed the line." The white-haired old man's beard twitched in anger. All four of them were old, and it was obvious that they had never met each other before. Even after meeting each other, other than a simple guess, none of them had announced their names. However, sitting together, laughing and bickering, it felt like they were old friends who had known each other for decades. They were definitely not strangers whom they had just met. Not at all. The three of them shook their heads in unison. Guarding the god of wine. Trying your best to extort more good wine out of him. That's really crossing the line. The white-haired old man's expression changed as he glared at the three of them. Suddenly, he threw his head back and guffawed, cursing, King hell. With a flick of his wrist, another jar of wine was placed on the table. He said angrily, "This is the only one left. There's no more." The three men's eyes shone. They had already snatched it over and opened it swiftly before pouring it into their respective cups, ignoring the white-haired old man's words. The white-haired old man poured his own wine bowl as well, murmuring, "If I don't drink, I won't even be able to drink the wine I brewed myself." Dugucho rubbed his belly and sighed, "My addiction to wine has been triggered. I don't want to work anymore. What should I do?" The middle-aged man in green looked distressed as well. "Me too," the skeletal man said, "From now on, I won't speak anymore. Everything they say represents me." The white-haired old man was speechless with rage. After a long while, he suddenly gritted his teeth and stomped his feet. With a wave of his hand, wine filled the table, under the table and in the tavern's hall. He bellowed, "Drink all of you to death." The three of them squealed in glee, "It's coming?" Sure enough, this old man has to be blackmailed. You won't get any wine if you beg him nicely. That's right, we have to blackmail him. The rumors are true. That's right. The white-haired old man was exasperated. Who said that you can't beg nicely? Have you? The three of them were stunned. The air was silent before a roar of laughter ensued. Speak. What is it that made you come out of seclusion and seek us for help? Dugucho asked. The white-haired old man chuckled. Actually, if I hadn't met you, I would have done it myself. But since I've met you, I can't be bothered to do it myself. Some time ago, a descendant of an old friend of mine came to me and told me that he was tricked. Someone disguised himself as me and used my name to become his ancestor. He even used my identity to wreak havoc in the empire of Zio. I was rather angry about this, even though my friend's descendant told me repeatedly that this person wasn't a bad person and didn't tarnish my reputation. Still, how can this old man's name be borrowed so easily? The white-haired old man said angrily. I didn't expect such a thing to happen. Dugucho and the skeletal man exchanged a glance and guffawed. The middle-aged man in green frowned, looking at Feng Xianga with a doubtful gaze. This white-haired old man who was known as the god of wine was, of course, the phantom physician god of wine, the legend of a generation, Feng Xianga. Who is this person? The skeletal man asked, guffawing. The pillar of Yutong, the only survivor of the 9 Supremes, Lord Supreme Cloud. Feng Xianga snorted. As soon as these words were spoken, the entire inn suddenly fell silent. Chapter 592. This old man knows that Lord Supreme Cloud is a national hero, a truly great figure who shakes the heavens and the earth. I have my own reasons for borrowing my name. I have no choice but to do so. However, I can't take this lying down. Feng Xianga said, so, we just need to find him and punish him lightly? The middle-aged man in green chuckled humorlessly and sighed, standing up abruptly. He began to fish out items from his robes. Gold notes, silver notes, jade marrow crystals. Then he opened his spatial ring and poured out a pile of treasured resources, saying calmly, Feng Xianga, look. Do you like anything here? Feng Xianga was genuinely shocked this time, stuttering, What do you mean? The middle-aged man said, if there's anything that catches your eye, Brother Feng, just say it. Here are the soul-sucking vine, the psychedelic grass, the netherworld vermilion fruit, and the drunken orchid from the previous year. These are all items that can be used to brew exquisite wine. How about I give them all to Brother Feng? Feng Xiang's expression changed as he said, what do you mean? You have to make it clear. The middle-aged man said, I wonder if these can make up for Brother Feng's wine that I've drunk just now? If not, I'll think of something else. Feng Xiang was taken aback before he flew into a rage. Ling Xiaozue. What do you mean? Although this old man has never met you, you don't have to humiliate me like this. In his agitation, his voice was much louder than before. When the innkeeper, who had been listening attentively, heard this name, he felt as if 3 thunderbolts had suddenly sounded in his head, and he almost fainted from the shock. Ling Xiaozue. Ling Xiaozue. I was wondering who would have the guts to knock on Duguchao's door and have the guts to make Duguchao guess. It turned out to be the publicly acknowledged, unrivaled expert in recent years. The identities of 3 of the 4 people who had been drinking were now clear. Duguchao, Ling Xiaozue and Feng Xiang. They were the pinnacle experts of legends and myths. They were the legends of a generation. The stories of these 3 people had spread far and wide. Their deeds had become legends that everyone in Tianshan continent was familiar with. Then who was the last person? Ling Xiaozue was not enraged when he heard Feng Xiang's question, but explained patiently, it's a helpless thing to say. I can't help you with this. Feng Xiang was stunned. I couldn't help you, but I drank the wine that could only be drunk with help. Ling Xiaozue said faintly, therefore I have to compensate you. And I want double the compensation. Why is that? Feng Xiang mumbled. Ling Xiaozue chuckled. Not only can I not help you, but I also have to obstruct the people who help you. Feng Xiang's eyes widened. There was actually such a godly twist. Feng Xiang could not help but be stunned, not knowing what to say for a moment. With Ling Xiaozue in the way, this matter would be difficult to resolve. At this moment, when the innkeeper heard Ling Xiaozue's words, he felt a rush of blood coursing through his veins. He dashed over and knelt before Ling Xiaozue. This lowly one thanks Lord Ling for your care and concern for our nation's Lord Supreme Cloud. This lowly one kowtows to Lord Ling. Bam, bam, bam. Under everyone's shocked gaze, the innkeeper kowtowed thrice consecutively. He wanted to continue but was pulled up by Duguchao with a sharp gaze. Why is this? The innkeeper was only an ordinary person, his cultivation base like a shrimp, but he was stern when faced with Duguchao, an expert who was above the clouds. Lord Supreme Cloud is Yutong's pillar, a Buddha to all. We, the common folk, can only wish for Lord Supreme Cloud to live a smooth life, to be free from sickness and pain. As long as Lord Supreme Cloud is still around, we'll have something to rely on. We'll have something to look forward to. We're not that capable. Other than blessing Lord Supreme Cloud, we'll also curse Lord Supreme Cloud's enemies to die a horrible death. The sooner they die, the better. The words of this insignificant person in the mortal world made the 4 peerless experts in the world fall into silence. What? Duguchao asked after a moment of silence. No reason. Although the innkeeper was a little afraid and his body was trembling, he still said boldly, because that's Lord Supreme Cloud, because this lowly one is Yutong's man. Well said. The skeletal man praised and turned to look at Feng Xiang, saying, I can't help you with this, but after drinking your wine, I can point the way for you 3 times. These 3 times of guidance can save you or the person you designate from certain death 3 times. Feng Xiang was even more stunned. He was still a little lost. Looking at Ling Xiaozue and the skeletal man who looked a little embarrassed, he felt even worse. What was going on? People of Ling Xiaozue's level would not usually promise anything, but once they did, there would be no going back on it. Since they were willing to sit down and drink with him, it was equivalent to saying, whatever you need, we'll do it for you. There was no way it could be fake. However, it was completely different now. A mere Supreme Cloud had actually made both of them change their minds at the same time. Even if it went against their usual principles, even if they owed him a bigger favor, they would not do it. What was going on? Why couldn't he understand this world? Feng Xiang chuckled humorlessly and asked, what about you, Dugu? Duguchao was silent for a moment before he said, this old man doesn't care. However, if Lord Supreme Cloud is truly such a loyal official who serves the country and the people, this old man can only warn him on your behalf. I can't do anything more than that. Feng Xiang laughed and said, if that's the case, why would I still trouble Supreme Cloud? Forget it. Let's just let this matter go. As long as Lord Supreme Cloud doesn't come into my hands, this old man won't trouble him anymore. He smiled and said, however, this old man was the one who cancelled this, so it's impossible for you to owe me a favor. Instead, I'm the one who went back on my word. I should be the one to treat everyone to a drink. The other three men laughed in unison. Makes sense, makes sense. It was at this moment that the sound of galloping horses could be heard from outside. The sound was far away. However, with the four experts here, no one was breathing loudly within a few miles. It was quiet. Under such circumstances, the sound of galloping horses was abrupt and crisp. The eyes of the four men shone brightly. An unparalleled steed. The skeletal man praised, this sound? This old man has never seen anything like it in my life. Ling Xiaozui drank a mouthful of wine and said, this old man has never seen anything like this in my life. Dugu Chao's ears were tilted to the side, listening to the incessant galloping like thunder. A strange longing expression hung on his face as he said faintly, this is a king of horses. I didn't expect such a magnificent steed to exist in this world after hunger all those years ago. Before his words echoed in the air, a horse had suddenly stopped at the entrance of the inn. It was clad in red. It was like a ball of fire, burning as it galloped in the darkness. It seemed like it had always been there, but it stopped abruptly. Dugu Chao's eyes widened abruptly. The skeletal man's pupils shrunk. Looking at the person on the horse, a mysterious smile tugged at the corners of his lips. Ling Xiaozui sighed. Why was this fellow here? Although this was a great opportunity for this fellow, Feng Xiang's desire for revenge had just been suppressed by the three of them. This was the moment when he was the most frustrated, though he did not say it aloud. This guy definitely shouldn't have come at this time. On the back of the horse there was a young man in purple. His face was like jade and his figure was like a tree in the wind. His eyes were filled with joy as he jumped down from the horse and shouted, Brother Ling, you're here. Why didn't you tell me that you were coming here? You almost made me break my legs. Everyone curled their lips. You clearly rode a horse here. How did you break your leg? The youth had already rushed over and plopped himself down on the stool by the table, leaning close to Ling Xiaozui and guffawed, Brother Ling, let's not go home until we're drunk today. He picked up a pot of Feng Xiang's wine and broke the clay seal with a slap. Raising both hands, he laughed and said, Brother Ling, the wine of the god of wine Feng Xiang is gone now. However, we're brothers. Whatever wine we drink, it's all Feng Xiang's wine. Come, let me toast you. Unexpectedly, he raised his head and gulped down the entire jar of wine. Wiping his mouth, he praised, Great wine. Lifting his head, he saw that the people at the table were looking at him like he was a god. Feeling a little lost, he wiped his mouth and asked, What is it? Chapter 593. What's wrong? Ling Xiaozui almost facepalmed when he heard the word. What do you think, brother? You've gone overboard with your pretentiousness. Among the three of them, Dugu Chao still looked indifferent while Feng Xiang's eyes were wide with shock, glaring at the child who had barged in. The skeleton-like fellow, on the other hand, had a meaningful look written all over his face. His gaze towards Yunyang was nonchalant, but in the depths of his eyes that no one could see was the thrill and excitement of having found a treasure. Brother Ling, this is nothing, is it? Yunyang scratched his head and shot Ling Xiaozui a look. However, Yunyang understood something from Ling Xiaozui's reaction. Ling Xiaozui looked at Yunyang, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He was speechless for a moment. It was just a random entry, a casual remark, but it had made the four pinnacle men of the world react differently. Just this move alone was undeniably powerful. Originally, the four of them were sitting around drinking wine. Not to mention the atmosphere, just the aura created by the four of them was not ordinary. However, a person that the other three did not know suddenly barged in, and even targeted one of them. This situation inevitably caused the other three to more or less feel displeased. Who are you? Is this a place you come to? Even if you know that person, do you know me? You've come in and you're drinking, chatting, and jumping around so familiarly. Who do you think you are? This fellow who had come out of nowhere sat down and gulped down a pot of wine without treating himself as an outsider. That was the world's finest wine brewed by the god of wine, Feng Xiang. There were only a few pots left in this world. Who did he think he was, drinking it just like that? In spite of it, the group was caught between laughter and tears when they heard the young man's words, unable to move. He had drunk an entire pot of Feng Xiang's wine without batting an eyelid right in front of the god of wine. He had then smacked his lips and said that he had no more of Feng Xiang's wine and could only replace it with other wines. Yet, what he had drunk was obviously Feng Xiang's wine. Who is this young brother? Feng Xiang'a asked in a low voice, squinting at the uninvited young man. There was a hint of displeasure in his tone. In such a grand event of the century, the participants were the pinnacle of the world. You, a young man with an unimpressive appearance and skills. Even if you had an impressive appearance and a high cultivation base because of your age, you are still not qualified to participate in this grand event. As the organizer of the event, Feng Xiang'a was naturally displeased with this uninvited guest. What I wanted to do was directly reject it. I drank for nothing, and there was even a hothead. Ling Xiaozui coughed and said, "This young man is my little brother. Every time I come to Tiantang City, I can't avoid meeting this young brother. We are friends despite the difference in age." Under the bewildered gazes of the trio, Ling Xiaozui added the last sentence as if he was possessed by some unknown force. However, this last sentence caused a certain uninvited guest status to soar. Although he still couldn't be compared to everyone present, he was no longer someone who couldn't participate on the same stage. Just the fact that he was Ling Xiaozui's friend despite the difference in age meant that he had the status, value, and qualification. If he had the status of being the world's unrivaled expert's friend, he would be qualified as well. We're friends, despite our age. The skeleton-like guy let out a long sigh meaningfully. He actually sounded a little eccentric. My young brother is straightforward and sincere, chivalrous, courageous and generous. It's his chance to be here today and it's everyone's chance too. Come, let's get to know each other and be friends. Ling Xiaozui's face was a little twisted as he forced a smile. Although Ling Xiaozui was full of flattery and flattering Yunyang, what he really wanted to do now was to beat Yunyang up. However, he had to uphold Yunyang's reputation. After all, Yunyang had done him a great favor. Without Yunyang's help back then, he would not be who he was today, nor would he have achieved what he had today. Thinking of this, Ling Xiaozui truly felt that this fellow was fearless, as if he was certain that he would be the one to win. You've come here so recklessly because you're sure that I'll endorse you, haven't you? Although I will indeed endorse for you. Who asked me to do that to you? What are you talking about, Brother Ling? Brother Ling's friends are my friends, your brothers are my brothers. Yunyang said amicably. This young brother Yunyang greets the three old brothers here. I haven't asked, what are the names of the three old brothers? I dare not speak about other places, but it's considered home for the three of you to come to Tiantang City. This territory is this young brother's home ground. I'll be there for everything. There won't be a problem. Ling Xiaozui remained silent with a dark expression. At this moment, his desire to send this fellow flying with a slap grew even stronger. Although what Yunyang had said could be considered as having a point, he was indeed a local tyrant in Tiantang City, a dragon on the outside. He had the right and the ability to spout such arrogant words, especially that little bit of luck that made others jealous. Did he know who these three people before him were? If they really wanted to do something, would they need Yunyang? No, you must know who these three people are. If you didn't, you might not have come even if you were beaten to death. The skeletal figure seemed to be suppressing his laughter as he chuckled and pulled Feng Xiang'a over, introducing him grandly. So it's Yutang's King Xiaoyao's heir, young Master Yunyang. I've long heard of young Master Yun's name. I'm here to rely on young Master Yun's strength. Come, let me introduce to young Master Yun. This is the god of wine, Feng Xiang'a. Once this person spoke, even Yunyang felt his face stiffen, let alone Ling Xiaozui and the others. Who was this fellow? Yunyang was well aware of the identities of three of the four people present, but he did not know who this skeletal fellow was and what his background was. However, what he had said out of the blue was embarrassing indeed. What did I say just now? What I said just now was obviously a joke to ease the awkward atmosphere. Why did you take it seriously and take advantage of the situation? This trick should be used by a junior like me. Isn't it too embarrassing for you to use it like this? Although I don't know who you are, you're an expert who drank with Feng Xiang'a, Ling Xiaozui, and Duguqiu after all. Can you be a little more shameless? It's an honor to meet you. I'm really sorry about what happened just now. Yunyang was truly stupefied now. He had not expected such a martial world senior to play his cards so unpredictably. For a moment he was embarrassed and stammered, which was rare for him. Feng Xiang'a glanced at the skeletal fellow in rebuke and chuckled dryly. It's all right. Young Master Yun, you don't have to be so courteous. Young Master's name is indeed known throughout the world. It's like thunder piercing my ears. Yunyang coughed and raised his goblet. I've only drunk senior's wine once before this. It's truly unforgettable. I was too excited to reunite with Big Brother Ling just now and have wasted much of senior's fine wine. It's impolite of me. This junior shall offer this wine to senior. Let this junior offer a toast to senior. His eyes were filled with sincerity as he said, Senior, perhaps you don't know this but you're my idol. I've grown up listening to your legendary stories since I was young. Yun Yang, who had skipped the awkward atmosphere, repeated the actor's acting skills and spoke with great emotion, revealing his true feelings. Feng Xiang'a choked at the words. Oh, young brother Yun, you're a heroic young man who's radiant and handsome. As he spoke, he ran out of words and turned to look at Ling Xiaozui. You've gone senile. Haven't you heard that young brother Yun Yang is Yutang's King Xiaoyao's son? Ling Xiaozui added. Yes. Young brother Yun is of noble blood, handsome and dashing. Feng Xiang'a suddenly stopped talking as he spoke. He felt that he had been led into the trap so easily. Why should this old man be courteous to such an insignificant child? You, Ling Xiaozui, treat him as a young brother, but what does that have to do with this old man? Do you really think this old man will use his relationship with an insignificant child like you? Then he put on a straight face and said nothing more. This is? Yun Yang was already mentally prepared, so he did not feel the slightest bit awkward. He turned to look at Dugu Cho, only to realize that the latter was looking back at him. He did not care about his impression now. All he wanted was a familiar face. Besides, with Ling Xiaozui here, he would not do anything to him. He was a natural aid. To his future plans, it would be immeasurably helpful. Otherwise, why would he rush over? No matter how great you are, I don't need to stick my warm face to your cold butt. That's because you're useful. No matter what, he had to drink this wine shamelessly. Chapter 594. Looking at Dugu Chao's gaze, however, Yun Yang was rather surprised. There was a trace of excitement and nostalgia in Dugu Chao's gaze. Why? Are you excited to see me? This old man's surname is Dugu? Dugu Cho said slowly, although you said that you're here for Ling Xiaozui, this old man doesn't believe that you didn't know who I am before coming here. His gaze was initially dull, but when he uttered the last few words, his eyelids fluttered. His gaze was like a bolt of lightning, causing Yun Yang to feel as if two mountains had collided in his heart, exploding with a loud bang. For a moment, his deific consciousness was in a trance. Yun Yang straightened up, retracting his frivolous, popinjay attitude and said seriously, Of course, since Senior Dugu is here, this junior will definitely come to visit even if I have no other excuse. Dugu Chao's expression was indifferent as he said, A smart man should be honest. This is wisdom. Dugu Chao's words were unusually sharp, like the weight of a mountain falling on Yun Yang. Dugu Cho had already decided that if the young man before him still maintained his previous attitude and tried to bluff his way through, he would teach him a lesson. Young men who achieved success at a young age often benefited from their momentary flash of inspiration. Most of them were just petty tricks. Using petty tricks often could solve many problems, but once they encountered a truly tricky problem, they would be caught in their own trap and even cause the situation to go out of control, leading to the worst possible outcome. Dugu Cho had come to a similar conclusion because of Yun Yang's behavior, so he intended to punish him. Unexpectedly, as soon as he made a gesture, the little fellow immediately changed his attitude. It was as if he had changed his face. He directly tore off his previous disguise, and then in an instant, he changed into a humble, courteous, gentle, honest and righteous image of respecting the old and loving the young. Dugu Cho felt that everything that he had intended to do had been futile. His punch that had been charged with energy felt like it had landed on a cloud. It was like a clay ox entering the sea. There was nothing he could do about it. Young Master Yun is indeed like his name. Your surname is indeed Yun, Dugu Cho said faintly after holding it in for a moment. Senior is right, Yun Yang said with a more respectful tone, his face filled with pride. The four experts looked at each other in dismay. For a moment all of them had the urge to burst out laughing. Young Master Yun's surname was indeed Yun. These four words were a stroke of genius, but they also understood how Dugu Cho felt when he punched the air. It was appropriate to use the phrase here. Senior Dugu has always been paying attention to my horse. I wonder why? Yun Yang asked in a humble manner. Dugu Cho sighed softly and said, This horse of yours? What's its name? Hong Hong. Yun Yang was rather proud. This is the name I gave it myself. Does Senior think that the horse lives up to its name? The other three once again looked at each other in dismay. How could such a majestic horse be given such a girly name? How could it be appropriate? How could it be appropriate? That's right. This name is very good. Who would have thought that Dugu Cho would compliment Reddy? He looked at Reddy affectionately and said, "It should be called Reddy. Calling it anything else doesn't sound nice." Yun Yang was stunned. Ling Xiaozue and the other two were stunned as well. What did he mean by that? Dugu Cho sighed and said, "It's a pity that such a majestic horse is in your hands." "That's right, it's a pity indeed," Yun Yang replied casually. Dugu Cho was surprised to see him admit it so readily. He glanced at him and asked again, "How is it a pity? Why is it a pity?" Yun Yang was dumbfounded, stunned on the spot. "Didn't you say it was a pity?" "I'm just going along with what you said. People nowadays are so difficult to get along with. Each of them has such a strange temperament. Is there no way to communicate properly?" After a pause, he said carefully, "The best choice for such a majestic horse is to return to the forest and roam freely for the rest of its life. Other than that, if it can gallop on the battlefield and assist its rider to be invincible, it would be a wonderful story. At the very least, it should be accompanying a masterful swordsman or the pinnacle of the world as they roam the martial world." Yun Yang said, "As for me, I don't belong to any of the three. It's a pity that it stays by my side." A golden gleam flashed in Dugu Chao's eyes as he said, "Since you know this, why don't you let it go?" Yun Yang chuckled dryly and said, "Reddy and I have never had a subordinate relationship. Since I got it, I've never added any harness to it. I've never even put a saddle or shoe on it. If it wants to leave, it can do so at any time. I don't know if Senior believes it, but Reddy and I are friends, we are best friends." Yun Yang's gaze was warm as he looked at Reddy and said, "It can't bear to leave me. Perhaps one day in the future, when I leave this world and this body can no longer exist, it will leave on its own when it no longer has any lingering concerns." Reddy stood quietly outside the inn, its horse eyes looking at Yun Yang with tenderness. It lowered its head and snorted, tilting its head to look at Dugu Cho and then at Yun Yang, then back at Dugu Cho. There was a sharp glint in the horse's eyes as it let out a low growl at Dugu Cho. It was as if it was threatening, "Don't even think about touching my master." That was how Dugu Cho interpreted it. He could not help the admiration in his eyes as he said comfortingly, not bad at all. For such a spiritual creature, it should meet a good friend who loves it so much and can think of a way to help it. This place of yours can be considered as another excellent home for a precious horse, but it is difficult to replicate. However, this situation is a great fortune for both you and it. However, no matter how experienced and knowledgeable Dugu Cho was, how could he understand the true meaning of Reddy's growl? Reddy was actually trying to warn him, "Don't even think about touching my long-term meal ticket. This fellow has too much to offer. I won't leave even if you chase me away." Yun Yang was surprised to see that Dugu Cho had opened his mouth. He did not expect that he and Dugu Cho would break the stalemate because of a horse. "Being fated to see such a divine steed today, I can't help but recall the horse I used to have." Dugu Cho's expression was melancholy. "I called it Reddy. Previously, I rode it to roam the martial world, enjoying myself in the mundane world. Finally, there came a day when my cultivation base had reached a certain height. Riding Reddy was much slower than when I used my movement skill. After trying for a long time, it still couldn't catch up to my two legs." Reddy began to feel dejected. It was probably from then on that it thought that it couldn't help me anymore. For a few years, Reddy ran with all its might, increasing its speed, wanting to be useful to me again. Finally, one day, it watched me fly into the sky, riding the wind. It watched me soar into the sky, standing on the peak of the mountain without moving for 3 days and 3 nights. For half a year after that, Reddy was inseparable from me. No matter where I went, it insisted on following me. Even when it couldn't keep up, it followed me. At that time, I actually started to get tired of Reddy following me, feeling like it was a burden. However, one day after half a year, when I woke up in the morning, I realized that Reddy was nowhere to be found. Since then, it never returned to my side. I thought about it for a long time and suddenly realized that Reddy couldn't bear to part with me. That was why it gave itself another half a year to be with me. Then it left quietly. After that, I traveled all over the world wanting to find Reddy, but I never found it again. Humans are so despicable. They don't know how to cherish what they have and they regret it when they lose it. This is the biggest regret of my life, Dugu Cho said in a melancholic tone. This horse of yours, be it its color, its appearance, or its steed, it's almost the same as Reddy's. I almost thought that it was Reddy's descendant. Yun Yang felt a sudden heaviness in his heart and he sighed instinctively. Yun Yang knew at once that Dugu Cho was destined to be disappointed. When he found Reddy, it was only a foal that was about to reach adulthood, while Dugu Cho's horse was at least 500 years ago. Judging by the time, it was impossible for Reddy to be Reddy's descendant. Even if it did possess Reddy's bloodline, who knew how many generations had passed. Yun Yang, young Master Yun, I hope that you can promise this old man that you must treat it well no matter when and where. Dugu Chao's gaze on Reddy was filled with tenderness as he said slowly, even if there comes a day when your cultivation base has reached a point where speed is no longer a limitation, don't hurt it. Yun Yang was silent for a moment when he heard that before he answered solemnly, I promise you. If that day really comes, I'll ask for its opinion. Even if it can't ride with me anymore, it can stay in my home forever. My home will always be its home. I repeat once again, we're bosom buddies, not subordinates. Even if it can't keep up with my speed anymore, there's still my family, my wife and my children who can keep it company. Yun Yang said earnestly, if I can live to that day. Dugu Cho smiled in satisfaction. Well said. Your realm is 2 levels higher than mine. I'll remember that. Yun Yang, you can call me old Dugu now. Before Yun Yang came, he had never expected to get to know Dugu Cho so smoothly. However, when he heard what Dugu Cho said at the end, Yun Yang was shaken. Chapter 595. Old Dugu. You can just call me Old Dugu. Yun Yang felt his heart skip a beat when he heard the words, his eyes reddening instantly. He was enveloped in a trembling emotion as he thought of the old man whom he had treated like a father. Thinking about it, he sucked in a deep breath and said hoarsely, I dare not. In my heart, old Dugu can only be one person, but he can never be senior. Dugu Cho asked. Yun Yang stood up and said, it's rare to have a joyous gathering with all the seniors here today. I've come with a purpose in mind. Everyone knows this, so there's no need to hide it. Fortunately, all of you didn't chase me away on the spot. I'm grateful for your hospitality. No matter what the outcome is, I won't let today's gathering down. He had gone from being cautious when facing the 4 experts to suddenly being bold. The drastic change in his emotions stunned the 4 men once again. They lifted their heads to look at him, their gazes filled with surprise. Yun Yang smiled and said, since it's a joyous gathering, this junior should try his best. I'll cook a dish for all of you now, seniors, please have a taste. He spoke slowly with deep emotion. I'm ashamed to say this, but this is the only dish I know how to cook until now. However, it's also a lifelong signature dish that I'm confident I can serve. Ling Xiaozue could acutely feel that Yun Yang's emotions were not quite right, so he interjected, what dish? Dare you call it a lifelong signature dish? Yun Yang grinned. Cabbage and tofu. At this moment he was smiling, but the 4 people around him all felt that his smile was even more miserable than a cry. Yun Yang turned around and asked, Boss, do you have cabbage and tofu? A moment later, an indescribable aroma slowly permeated the room. The 4 men sniffed, surprise evident in their eyes. They did not expect this child to not be boasting. Just by smelling the aroma, they could already tell that the dish he had cooked was extraordinary. Although it was the most common home-cooked dish, it had indeed reached the pinnacle of home-cooked dishes. Not bad. Not bad at all. It's a lifelong signature dish indeed. Dugu Cho sniffed the aroma in the air and said, back in the day my wife had a signature dish as well. I've eaten it my entire life, but I've never had enough of it. The reason this dish is a signature dish and it's delicious is that most famous chefs use their skills when they cook. Dugu Cho said softly, however, people like my wife and Yun Yang use their hearts when they cook. To be able to eat such a dish in this lifetime. Good, very good. Dugu Cho told Ling Xiaozue, Dugu Cho, Ling Xiao, this young brother of yours is really not bad. Whether it be to a horse or a person. You said that his arrival is an opportunity for everyone and it's not a lie. Ling Xiaozue chuckled. I thought you were going to beat him up. Dugu Cho guffawed. If he had remained the way he was when he first arrived, he wouldn't have been able to escape this beating. Not only would I beat him up, I'd beat you up as well. But now. He sniffed the aroma in the air that was growing thicker and said softly, a small clue can reveal a big picture. Yun Yang is talented, but his outstanding looks are secondary. I'm more concerned about his feelings. He treats horses with sincerity. He treats people with sincerity. To be able to cook such an attentive dish, he must be someone who values his feelings to the extreme. Therefore it can't be wrong. Moreover, the fact that he came to us shows that he's not inflexible and inflexible. In order to get to know the people he wants to know, he can even change himself. If I were to do evil, I would definitely become a hero of the world. If I were to do good, I would definitely become a Buddha. A very good young man. Dugu Chao's tone deepened as he said, very good. The corners of Ling Xiaozue's eyes were smiling as he said, I've always thought that this young man is not bad. Feng Xiang'a smiled and said, not bad indeed. The skeleton-like man said, "Not only is it not bad, it's also very amazing." Amazing? The three of them turned to look at him. A young man who could be praised by the three of them could be considered one of a kind. It was a first for a young man to be praised by Dugucho. In spite of this, an even more extreme comment came from the man's mouth. Amazing. This comment was truly amazing. The skeleton-like man grinned, condensing his voice into 3 lines and sending it into the 3 men's ears. Don't doubt my comment. What I said just now was rather reserved because the young man before me might be the most amazing person I've ever seen. You can't see how amazing he is because you're not me. That's all. Hearing this, Dugucho, Feng Xiang'e, and Ling Xiaozui paled in shock. Amazing. Can't see? Not me? There was actually someone in this world who dared to speak to the 3 of them like this. This was truly amazing. They really could not see it. Although the 4 of them were seated at the same table, drinking wine together, the reason for this outcome was only because of the current situation. It was because of the chi interaction between them that they felt that their cultivation base was similar. Even if there was a difference, it would not be huge. This was why the current conversation was held. The last person did not actually know any of the 3 men, but his words revealed his superior opinion. Ling Xiaozui and the other 2 men were the cream of the crop, the pinnacle of the world. How could they stand it? You say that we can't see it, but do you? Feng Xiang'e snorted and asked with a sideways glance. Of course, the skeleton-like man replied. May I ask who you are? Feng Xiang'e asked. The skeleton-like man sighed and said, The god of wine has served us wine and we've had a great time at the beginning. I thought you've guessed who I am. Turns out that you haven't. Feng Xiang'e frowned, speechless for a moment. Dugucho and Ling Xiaozui exchanged a glance, deep in thought. Dugucho had already vaguely guessed the identity of this skeleton-like man, but now he was even more certain of it. The skeleton-like man smiled faintly and poured himself a full bowl of wine. He finished it in one gulp and said softly, A word from me can perhaps save you from certain death, but a word from him can. As he said this, his face suddenly twitched, revealing a look of extreme pain. Then, with a puff, he spat out a mouthful of blood. He turned his head at the right moment. The blood that he had spat out flew out like an arrow and into the darkness. But from the other side of the darkness, a scream suddenly came out. The scream was only halfway through before it stopped abruptly. It was as if someone was coincidentally there and had been hit by the mouthful of blood. The person only had time to scream, but before his voice echoed in the air, he was already dead. This time Ling Xiaozui and the other 2 men were visibly shaken as they spoke in unison. It's you. It's really you. Chapter 596. There are so many of us here, yet someone is still so interested in listening to what we have to say. The skeletal man chuckled and wiped away the blood stain at the corner of his lips. He stood up slowly and picked up a ladle of water to rinse his mouth carefully. Then he walked back to sit down and said with a chuckle, Of course it's me. It's me. Don't you never show your face? Ling Xiaozui asked, Why have you appeared before us in your true form this time? There must be a reason behind this. The skeletal man chuckled humorlessly. It can be said that there is a reason behind this or that the world is unpredictable. It's a long story, but since I've appeared before you and Dugucho, of course, I'm looking for both of you to help me. Dugucho's expression turned serious as well. May I ask what it is? To be able to make this person run out to seek help and seek out both Dugucho and Ling Xiaozui, 2 of the world's acknowledged unrivaled experts, at the same time, one could imagine that this matter was anything but simple. There's no hurry to ask for the both of your help. There's still room for it. The skeletal man said, The most pressing matter now is to ask for Feng Xiang'e's help. I wanted to look for Qing Jishe, but it's a pity that even I can't find him. Luckily Feng Xiang'e can fulfill my wish as well. Feng Xiang'e chuckled and said, What do you mean by that? Your initial intention is to seek Qing Jishe, but your ultimate goal is to concoct the medicine. If I were to concoct the medicine, would you dare take it? Feng Xiang'e was the god of wine, not the god of medicine. Finding a winemaker to concoct the medicine required the consumer to think carefully. Although Feng Xiang'e was a renowned physician, he was the phantom physician of wine and not the real divine physician. The skeletal man said, If it were Qing Jishe, of course I would need to concoct the medicine. However, I said that you, Feng Xiang'e, can fulfill my wish as well because I only need you to concoct the wine for me. His expression turned unprecedentedly serious as he said, I remember it clearly. There was a rumor back then that you were researching the soulless wine of 3 lives? Feng Xiang'e's expression changed as he uttered word by word, Why would you want to drink that wine? The skeletal man sighed. Someone planted a spirit of poison in me. I had no choice but to take the risk. Poison spirit. The three of them were shocked once again when they heard this, and they were no longer as calm and composed as before. More than 99% of the people in this world had never heard of these two words, but Feng Xiang'e and the other two were exceptions. Not only had they heard of it, not only did they know about it, but they also fully understood how terrifying it was. This guy in front of him had a poison spirit planted in him, and yet he was still sitting here alive and kicking. It was a miracle. Of course, taking into account this person's status, strength, background, and resources, nothing could harm him. Even if he was harmed by the poison spirit, he would still be able to make the best use of it. Otherwise, do you think I would look like this? The skeletal man sighed. I was also very handsome in the past, not to mention that the little guy just now wasn't bad either. Even if he was bad, it wouldn't be by much, but the attribute of the poison spirit is mystical. There's really no cure. Even with the soulless wine of 3 lives, it can only let you and the poison spirit perish together. It can't really cure you, so how can it help? Feng Xiang'e said, what's more, the wine is harmful to nature. After the poisoned person dies, the body will stiffen, invulnerable to weapons, water, and fire. Even if the body is placed on a high mountain and the spiritual qi of heaven and earth is used to dispel the evil, it can only last for 10 years at most. After 10 years, the entire mountain will turn into a wasteland. The qi of the earth won't recover even after 10,000 years. And in these 10,000 years, anyone who passes through this mountain will suffer varying degrees of poison damage. Until this mountain turns into a true poisonous mountain. Yet, you want to drink this wine, the soulless wine of 3 lives, doesn't belong in this world at all. Feng Xiang'e said, although I know the brewing method, I dare not try it. If I were to do it myself, I'm afraid I'd be poisoned to death before the wine is made. The skeletal person said, you know who I am, so of course you should know that what I say is true. It will come true. As long as you're willing to help, I have a way to help you brew this wine, said the skeletal person. What if I refuse to help? Feng Xiang'e's gaze was icy as he asked menacingly. You don't have to put on airs in front of me. You'll definitely help me. If you're not willing to help, I won't come to you. The skeletal person smiled. Feng Xiang'e's cold demeanor vanished as he groaned in pain. I really can't deal with a monster like you. Why did I come to Tiantang City? Why can't I be tempted? Dugu Chao's gaze was strange as he said, since you know everything, how can you be manipulated like this? Is it inevitable that fate plays tricks on people? The skeletal person chuckled. Yes, it's inevitable. Didn't you already know that your wife can't be with you forever back then? Why do you still want to get involved? Dugu Chao's face suddenly turned green. Fortunately, the skeleton-like person continued, Dugu, this is a predestined fate. No one can avoid this fate, it's the same for you and me. I can't avoid it, I can't abandon it, I can't leave it, I can't live, I can't die, I can't cry. The skeletal person heaved a long sigh. The other 3 sighed at the same time as well. It was only a few dozen words, but it was enough to fill one's heart with endless emotions. Especially when one had reached their level, listening to these words filled their hearts with mixed emotions. After talking about me, let's talk about the rest of you. Today's meeting is a fortuitous encounter, so I should give you a few words of advice. The skeletal person looked at Ling Xiaozue and said, Ling Xiaozue, I've come with a request. There's something I need to do, but you can't do it alone. Ling Xiaozue nodded with a bitter smile. The skeletal person looked at Dugu Chou and said, Old Dugu, you too. You've come with a request as well, so you need someone's help even more. Dugu Chou nodded faintly. As for you, Feng Xiang'e, you're not here to find trouble with Supreme Cloud. The skeletal person turned to look at Feng Xiang'e and said, You've come with a request as well, so you need help. Feng Xiang'e seemed to want to say something, but the words did not leave his lips. He sighed and lowered his head. There's no need to sigh. I'm just the pot calling the kettle black. I've come with a request as well. The skeletal person chuckled and recited slowly like a song, Life is full of hardships, who can have no requests? The muscles on Dugu Chao's face twitched suddenly. Gritting his teeth, he took a deep breath and closed his eyes, drinking it all in one gulp. This was because the 2 lines that the skeletal person had said were the opening lines of a song. This song was called I Have a Request, and it corresponded to everyone's concerns. Back then, Dugu Chao's wife had loved to sing this song the most. Now that he heard someone sing it again, Dugu Chou felt a sourness in his heart, like the crashing waves of the ocean. For a moment, A multitude of emotions welled up within him, the bitterness indescribable. Life is full of hardships. Who can have no requests? Dugu Cho chuckled, tapping his chopsticks against his wine bowl as he sang along. Life is full of hardships. Who can have no worries? Looking at success and failure, the world turns white. Drinking a cup of bitter wine, the years flow east. Sighing at the chaos of the world, love has its end. Crying, a general, a marquis is but a mound. Calling me brother, when did we turn against each other? Looking at the road ahead under your feet, when did your hand disappear from my palm? Who can have no requests? Who can have no worries? I have a request. I ask that beauties never grow old and heroes never worry. I have a request. I ask that the world is full of flowers. I have a request. I ask that I stay with you for all eternity. I have a request. I ask that the world's love never changes. You and I depend on each other until 1,000 years later. Chapter 597. To be fair, Dugu Cho did not have a good voice and he sang like a sister. However, everyone present could hear that he was exceptionally attentive and engrossed in his performance. His low, raspy voice evoked a sense of melancholy in those who heard it. As the skeletal man listened, he gathered all his thoughts into a long, gloomy sigh. Ling Xiaozue looked exceptionally dejected as well, while Feng Xiang'e closed his eyes and listened attentively, one of his hands tapping lightly on his thighs, a look of reminiscence on his face. His head of white hair fluttered in the night breeze, solemn and solemn. For a moment, the four influential figures who had long stood at the pinnacle of the world were lost in their own thoughts. The room was filled with desolation. Legendary figures like them had far more experience than ordinary people. Who among them could achieve such accomplishments in this lifetime? Who among them did not have an unforgettable past? Now that time had passed, the past was like a puff of smoke. Hundreds of years of time had turned to dust. What would it feel like to sing the song that one's true love loved the most at this very moment? Where were the beauties who had once been so affectionate to each other? Those peerless beauties that once lingered endlessly, had long been battered by the wind and the rain. Now the splendor was gone. Only four old men were left, sitting and drinking. Although they were already standing high above the clouds, overlooking the world, was there anyone by their side? The path of Tao was arduous and difficult. Loneliness was to be expected, but when it came to it, it was hard to describe the sorrow. Yun Yang stood at the kitchen door, looking at the four of them and could not help sighing inwardly. He could not help thinking, if I were to be like them in a few decades, a few centuries, would I be just like them, reminiscing about Zhou Lingfeng? The feeling. The skeleton-like person sighed deeply, and then finally raised his head and took a deep breath. He then flipped his wrist and took out a purple jade flute. He held it in his hand and put it to his lips. The faint sound of the flute sobbed like a sob. It was near yet far, barely audible, but it went straight into the depths of one's heart. By the time Yun Yang sat down again, the singing had already faded away and the flute had already finished its last note. There were only soft sighs in his ears. It seemed that everyone present had gone through a cycle of reincarnation because of this song and this flute. This is your signature dish, Chinese cabbage and tofu? Dugu Cho picked up a mouthful of food, his expression growing more despondent. He sighed softly after drinking a bowl of wine. Not bad, not bad. This is Chinese cabbage and tofu indeed. Ling Xiaozue and the rest were silent as well, sighing as they drank. Dugu Cho ate a few mouthfuls of food and was suddenly lost in thought. Then he looked at the skeletal man solemnly. The man smiled and said, "Do you have any other requests?" Dugu Cho sucked in a deep breath and said, "I want to ask you a question. Can you answer me directly?" "Ask away." "I'll do my best," the skeletal man replied. Dugu Cho enunciated each word clearly. "Can I still see her?" Everyone was stunned by Dugu Cho's question. Everyone, including Yun Yang, knew very well who the sheik that Dugu Cho was referring to was. She had been dead for hundreds of years. How could he still see her? Even if reincarnation did exist, hundreds of years had passed. Who knew how many lifetimes she had been reincarnated for? Unexpectedly, the skeleton-like monster was silent for a long time, and did not speak for a long time. The more silent he was, the brighter Dugu Cho's eyes shone. The fact that the other party did not reject him directly but was musing meant that there was hope and a chance. As long as there was a possibility, it was better than anything else. Ling Xiaozue and the rest could not help feeling nervous as well, their gazes fixed on the skeletal man. Yun Yang, on the other hand, held his breath, feeling his heart thumping in his chest. If there was still a chance to meet someone who had been dead for a long time, did it not mean that he still had a chance to see old Dugu again? Yun Yang really wanted to meet this old man who was like a father, to tell him that his son, his seventh brother, might not be dead yet and was still in this world. His elder brothers, it's better not to see each other. Why should we meet again? The skeletal man sighed. This life is over. Dugucho was unwilling to give up. I know you must have a way. Tell me, how can I see her again? No matter what the method is, as long as it can be realized, I'll owe you a favor. The skeletal man was silent for a long time before he said, Sai, I'm hesitant because I know there's only one way, but this method, you won't be able to do it. You might not be able to do it. He sighed and said, actually, in the hundreds of millions of years under this starry sky, there have been no more than 10 people who have been able to do this since the beginning of time. Dugucho perked up again and said, I am grateful to know the method. Please show me the way. Dugucho, I shall be eternally grateful for your kindness. The skeletal man sighed softly and said, Fine, let me tell you a story first. Everyone immediately pricked up their ears. They all knew that this story was no small matter and could not be compared to ordinary legends. Yun Yang was especially focused, afraid that he would miss the slightest detail. Who knows how many years ago, under this starry sky, there was an unparalleled expert. I can't say his name. He had reached the pinnacle of the world he came from. He had a long lifespan and was almost immortal. However, his lover had a short life. Before he mastered his mystical art, she had already left the world. Their love was deep and their fate was shallow. This person and his lover were deeply in love. They were in so much pain that they wished they were dead. He tried everything he could to revive his lover so that they could reunite in this world. When he reached this point, everyone's eyes lit up like torches. Revive. Although his strength had reached the pinnacle of the world and he could look down on the world with disdain, his cultivation base alone was of no help in this matter. He put up a bounty and spread it across the world in search of a feasible method, but he didn't find anything even after a long time. He didn't know what to do. He refused to give up and continued to search bitterly. Many years later he finally met someone. That person probably pitied him and took pity on his infatuation. That person told him, when his cultivation base continued to break through, one day when he could break through the limits of this starry sky, then he would be able to resurrect his lover. Hearing this, Yun Yang and the other three looked up at the sky at the same time, gazing at the boundless night sky. There were countless stars in the night sky, blinking and twinkling in a place far away. Break through the limit of this starry sky? Yun Yang mumbled in his heart. The skeletal man continued to narrate, because of this thought, this person really began to work towards this goal. He kept breaking through his realm, cultivating as if he was draining his life force. Then he kept on fighting and honing himself. However, he was already one of the strongest experts in the world to begin with. Even after he improved, he discovered that he was already invincible in the world. However, he still couldn't even leave this continent, let alone the limits of the distant starry sky. He didn't give up, so he began to search for a way to break through this continent. He tried to create his own cultivation method to break through the original limit. Finally, one day he succeeded in shattering the void and ascended to a higher level. However, when he ascended to a new world, he was shocked to realize that his cultivation base hadn't really reached the pinnacle because there were plenty of experts who were stronger than him in the new world. He had only broken through the world he was born in, but it was still far from it. There were too many experts here and he was still in the same place after all. He didn't break through the limit of the starry sky, therefore he began to cultivate again. He kept on fighting, kept on breaking through, kept on honing himself, only moving towards that one goal, moving forward without stopping. At this point, the skeleton-like monster paused. What happened after that? Dugucho felt his throat go dry, his voice so hoarse that he could barely hear himself. Finally, he reached an amazing state. With a punch, he could shatter the stars. With a roar, he could turn the sun and moon invisible. With a wave of his hand, he could maintain it for countless years without dissipating. The skeletal man said, "There's no need to doubt or be surprised because at that time, he was already in existence who had already comprehended the law of Tao. It was also when he reached that level that he defied the laws of nature and returned to his original continent with his own power. Then he began to turn back time." You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.